Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Tuesday. Brian, we had a heck of a start to the week, but we're back. And
you had a heck of a start to the week. I put in like a good 25 minutes yesterday, and I was out. So Trev had to carry the load yesterday, which I apologize for, but I am back. And we have power, and as of now, it's a nice day outside, so hopefully that'll continue for the next few hours.
Here's hoping, man. We were talking after the show yesterday, and it's like, yeah, lack of power makes our jobs pretty difficult. Yep. So glad to have you back, man. And we have a loaded slate coming your way. We've finished our State of the Program series where we have kind of dove into every position group on the team. And, before we really completely turn the page into the full bulk of our summer content, and really excited for all of that to be coming out here shortly, I wanted to talk about the Notre Dame coaching staff, because at the end of the day, you can have all the talent in the world. And we've seen very, very talented teams come through Notre Dame. But it's the guys pointing them in the right directions is ultimately going to dictate the overall success of this team and play a big role in Notre Dame winning a championship this year. And so that's what we're going to cover in today's show. Part one, we're talking about big picture, Marcus Freeman, the guy steering the ship. Part two, we're going to be talking about the offensive coaching staff, which is a unit of guys that have a lot to prove going into this year. And then part three, we're going to be talking about the defensive coaching staff and all the questions that they have to answer going into this season as well. And we're going to be wrapping everything up with a daily mailbag and all of those questions. Really, you can ask any question that you want, but the focus is going to be on college football coaches, Notre Dame coaches. Those will take precedent. But Brian, really fun show today, man.
It is. And look, here's what's at the heart of today's show, Trev. We talked about coaches to a degree within some of the positional previews, but here's really what's the question that I shouldn't say that we're going to ask, because we don't have an answer. This is the question that's at the heart of today's show. And that is, does Notre Dame have a coaching staff that has the chops to lead this team to a championship? And I think both of us have the same answer. We think so, but ultimately we don't know so. Because there's only one coach on the staff that has been part of a national championship team. That was over a decade ago, and it's a guy that a lot of people have questions about, that being Chris Ash. Is the only one that's been on a national championship team at the Division I level. And so you look at it and say, okay, we think this coaching staff has the chops, and we're going to talk about that. But at the same time, I think there are some coaching staff decisions and some head coaching decisions that have been partially responsible for in ways that we can point to, and then some ways that we don't really know why this went the way it did, because we weren't there for fall camp, that have said that's why it's allowed this team to kind of fall short. And that's really at the heart of it, Trevor, because I think, like I said, I think you and I share the same answer. Is this a championship caliber staff? And our answer is, we think it is, yes. Well, but do you know? No, I don't. I can say that Kirby Smart, to a degree, is a championship coach. Can you tell me definitively that Kirby Smart is a championship? Does he have a championship staff? That's a different question, because some of the drivers of his championships are gone. So that's at the heart of a lot of this, Trevor, when we get into it. But you know what? I just realized something, that there's something that I forgot to do at the start of today's show. I wanted to do this real quick. So Ethan, member of the board, name is Keys to the Car. He is getting married this weekend, Trevor, and reminded me of you, his fiance, his girlfriend of 8 years. They're getting married this weekend, Ethan and Ellie. So Ethan and Ellie, before we dive into today's show, I did want to wish both of you a wonderful final week of not being married and a wonderful decades of being married. I know Trevor, I knew Trevor briefly before he got married, and now know Trevor that he's been married. I've been married now 18 years, and I couldn't imagine my life without Angela. So it's funny. I'll have memories where I will be like, you didn't even know me then. And I'll share, you remember that time? And she's like, Brian, I didn't know you then. I'm like, oh yeah. In my head, I can remember you being there. But he had asked me for some marital advice, and the biggest advice I gave him is what worked in my marriage, Trevor, which is when my priority stopped being my own happiness and me providing her happiness and her protection, because that's what God commands me to do, not because she necessarily deserves it, because I love her and because it's the right thing to do. And it's what God commanded me to do, to love, honor, cherish, and protect her and provide for her to the best of my ability. And she started being more outwardly focused on me, and I started being outwardly focused on her, whether I deserved it or not, or she deserved it or not, has really been a big thing that's in our marriage. And never take your spouse for granted. And also understand that as people, we always evolve, and you're always learning new and keeping it fresh. So we wish you guys all the best. And I know we'll be praying for you guys and thinking for you guys, but enjoy this last week of not being married as you get excited about what is to come. So we wanted to wish you guys the best. And we're thankful that you felt that we're the type of community and family that you wanted to share that news with. So I just wanted to wish Ethan and Ellie a happy nuptials this weekend, and prayers on a wonderful, wonderful life together. So I wanted to get that out there before we got started. So yeah, there he is. He is listening today. So yeah, we appreciate you two very, very much, man. So make sure Ellie knows that we're going to do our best to steer you in the right direction as married men, trying to give you the good advice to be a good, godly husband and a Notre Dame husband, right? So if she's not a Notre Dame fan yet, I would imagine after 8 years, she's probably hooked on Notre Dame pretty well too. So anyway, wanted to get that out of the way. So I apologize for the sort of the interruption there, but I wanted to get that out of the way at the very beginning and wish them the best. But circling back, what we want to see happen is during Ethan and Ellie's first year of marriage, we want to see Notre Dame win a national championship. And I believe that most people think us, but not just us. Let's take it away from the Notre Dame side of things. Look around nationally. You have FanDuel odds, Trev. I think you said the other day they are tied for first, or were they in second behind Ohio State?
Yes, sir.
For best odds to win a championship. They were first for our best odds to make the playoff. That's what you said, correct? Best odds to make the playoff on FanDuel, second best odds to win a championship. We've seen people argue the same thing that we've argued, that this might be the deepest roster in college football. My guy Joe, the other day, he got an early look at Athlon, their preseason preview. Notre Dame was not ranked in the top 10 nationally at running back, which we think they will be into the year. But in their unit rankings, they were fourth at quarterback, ninth at receiver, first in O-line, second on D-line, second at linebacker, first at DB. Right? This isn't just our opinion. It's a loaded roster. Everybody kind of feels that way. So the roster's in play. The question then becomes, is the coaching staff good enough? And at the end of the day, Trev, it always starts at the very top with head coach Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's the driver of the ship, and he's at the helm. And that's where the conversation always has to start. The further your point about FanDuel, Notre Dame is also the favorite to make it to the quarterfinals and the favorite nationally to make it to the college football playoff semifinals. Why are they confident in that? Because they watched that same head coach in Marcus Freeman make it there not too long ago and have a lot of success. They have the second best odds to make the national championship game, the second best odds to win it. And that's where this conversation starts. Does Notre Dame have a head coach in place that can get them over the hump? When you talk about Marcus Freeman, it's going to be a big year for him, and it's time to put it all together. Brian, how many times have we talked on shows, off air, just when we're kind of chopping it up and talking ball? How many times have we talked about how, gosh, do you take, this year and you put them together and it's a championship winning team. You take this year and you put it together. No team in the country stopping that team in 2017 or something. And that's the task ahead of Marcus Freeman. Can you put it all together? Yeah.
Could you take the 18 defense and put it with whatever 15 offense, or, if you could take the 2017 defensive coaching staff with Mike Elko and Clark Lee and put it on the 2015 team with Mike Denrock and Harry Heastan. You ask all those questions all the time. If you could take this quarterback and put him behind that offensive line, or this running back and put him behind that offensive line. I mean, we've had some fun conversations on the air and off the air about, could you imagine what Jeremiah Love's numbers would have looked like if he was running behind the 2017 or 2015 offensive line? You know what I mean? Like Jadarian Price might have put up Jeremiah Love numbers, and Jeremiah Love might have put up, who knows, Derrick Henry numbers, man. Who knows what they would have been able to do behind that offensive line. But the point being is, it is up to Marcus Freeman to put it all together. because he's the head football coach. And look, there's no more excuses. Not that he's asking for any. We've given him excuses because they're legitimate. It's okay to say, hey, listen, this is why they didn't win it all this year. Yeah, maybe they could have put it all together and everything on perfectly, but the margins for error was really slim because of this, because of that. You lost this, you lost that. You look at it now, Trev, and say, look, the roster's loaded. You've got your hand-picked coaching staff, no guys that we were debating. Well, did Jack Swarbrick make him hire this guy? Did he hire that guy? He doesn't do this. He doesn't know that. He doesn't. No more of that. You've got your hand-picked coaching staff. You've got a favorable schedule. Now, I didn't say easy or soft schedule, but it is a favorable schedule. Two of your best opponents are at home. You don't have anybody really difficult early in the season, which has been a big struggle for Notre Dame. So I think when you look at it, it's like, look, everything is there. Now it's time for him to be able to put it all together and say, okay, I've learned some of the lessons. I've built the roster. This is now your roster entirely. You're in year 5. No more, well, BK left him with this issue. BK left him with that issue. You've got to change the culture because of this. Look, dude, you're in year 5. You own this team. No one can give credit to anyone else, and no one can put blame anywhere else. And if you were to ask me if I know Marcus Freeman at all, that's exactly how he wants it. You know, like, look, this is my team. There are no more excuses. I've never heard Marcus Freeman make an excuse for why his team didn't play to the level. He's sometimes expressed frustration, like, I don't know why we were this way. That's fine. Sometimes you don't know. I remember listening to Dabo Swinney after Notre Dame kicked their butts in 2022. Like, yeah, I didn't see this coming. We had a great week of practice. Everything went the way we went, and then we just got our butts kicked. I get it. Sometimes that happens, but now you're in year 5. You've got all these things going in your way. It's time to show that you can do that. And so what we're going to do here, Trev, is we're going to talk about kind of what we know about Marcus Freeman, the things that lead us to both rank him in the top 5 of coaching in college football. Some others don't have him in the top 5, but I haven't seen him anywhere lower than 7th so far. What are the reasons for that beyond just, well, this is what his record is, but what has led to him to be able to compile the record he has? And then in part 2, we'll say, okay, what are the things that we need to see different in year 5? And then, what are the final questions? And then we'll dive into the offensive staff next, and then defensive staff, as Trevor said. So when it gets down to it, first and foremost, Trev, and you talk about, what has Marcus Freeman shown? I think one big picture thing is he's shown that he's a player's coach in the standpoint of the way that he interacts with his players. The one thing that I've never really seen is I don't think they're playing for him. I don't think they're responding to him. I think the players look at him as someone that we absolutely want to play for, and we will follow him. We will trust him. There does seem to be a level of, even still, going into year 5, you listen to players talk, there seems to be a level of, we believe in the man leading the ship, and we will follow the man leading the ship. And that, to me, is what a player's coach is, not a guy that bros you up all the time and, is dealing with an issue of like, hey, man, like, let's be cool. Let's be buddies. I'm your friend. It's not that. It's, hey, I'm your coach, and it's my job to make sure that you're being challenged. I think the players respect that, and there's no doubt that they play hard for this guy. They trust him and they follow him. And at the end of the day, if you don't have that, none of the other stuff is going to matter. And of the things that we will ask questions about, this is not one that we've really ever had to address. Like, I don't know if these players trust him or if they're willing to follow him. Through 4 years, that's never been a problem. So I can't foresee it being a problem in year 5. I think this is certainly a strength of him as a coach so far.
Without a doubt, we talk about some of the biggest differences between Marcus Freeman and the previous regime, and I think this is it. We could talk about the results on the recruiting trail. Those are all true. The results in the postseason, those are all true. Conversations that we'll have here soon. But he is a player's coach through and through, and the thing that I think makes it so effective is that it's authentic. It's not a show. It's not playing into the, I'm a younger coach, I'm a good-looking coach, I'm one of the big up-and-comers in college football, and I'm going to make my bread with being cool with everybody, to your point. It's authentic because it's based on the foundation of he knows what Notre Dame can give players and all student athletes at Notre Dame, and he wants to live through that. It's why he goes to basketball games. It's why he encourages the football team to go support Dylan Faison and Matt Jeffrey, and last year Jordan Faison and Matt Jeffrey when they were playing lacrosse. It's all things, all-encompassing. Marcus Freeman is completely bought into the vision and what Notre Dame can provide for you. And that's a really easy person to follow. you compound that on the fact that he played college football at a very high level. He was taken in the NFL draft. There's a lot of things where coaches can.
Wasn't he a 4th-round pick?
I believe so. Yeah, by the Chicago Bears. And those are things that players can resonate with, because Marcus Freeman grew up with those same goals of playing college football at a high level and making it to the next level. And then he's also had to have a realistic world and window into what do you do after football. I think that's why his 4 for Forever vision is so successful with a lot of the high school recruits. So I'm with you, man. He's absolutely a player's coach. I love everything that he's done in that aspect.
And getting that buy-in is going to be important. Let's talk about another thing that we've seen Marcus Freeman show so far as a coach, and that is he can recruit this. He hires coaches that are good evaluators and good recruiters. I mean, you don't get to where they are right now, where we're talking about them having the most talented roster in football, or even in the debate for most talented roster in football, if you don't have the ability to recruit top players across the board. And you look at the roster, as we've talked about, Trev, I think the only players on the roster that were recruited by Brian Kelly and his staff are guys like Jason Onye, Ashton Craig, players like that who, even a guy like Ashton Craig, he was recruited by Brian Kelly, committed to Brian Kelly, never played for Brian Kelly. I think the only guy on the roster that played a season for Brian Kelly is Jason Onye, I believe. And they don't have any LSU transfer, so there wasn't anybody who played for him there. I mean, so this is your roster. And so you can't say, well, he inherited this, that, or the other thing. It's like, dude, this is the roster you've put together. Your high school recruiting is that. And we said last year was going to tell us if Marcus Freeman and his staff are legit at recruiting and evaluating, because that was really the first roster that was entirely dominated by his classes and his development. And we saw a team that was absolutely dominant for most of the season. And then obviously had the 2 bad losses at the beginning. So there's still some questions about some other things, but they didn't lose to Miami and Texas A&M because we felt, boy, they just weren't good enough here, talent-wise. It was more of they didn't play well here. Like you and I watched Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner go against Indiana's defensive ends the year before and handle their business. We watched them go against Georgia's defensive line and handle their business. We watched them go against Penn State, handle their business. We watched Emil against Ohio State, and he held his own. It wasn't a lack of talent. He'd never not played someone like Ruben Bain before or Keem Messador. It was they played terrible. It wasn't, gee, I don't know if you're talented enough at this position. It was you got out-coached or you got outplayed or you got out-prepared. So I think when you look at it, obviously, recruiting has been a big part of it. And I think for the most part, he's been a great motivator. There's been some games that you're like, I don't know that he did a good enough job preparing your team for the Northern Illinois game a week afterwards. But those are all things that he has learned during, coming in. But I think the motivation, the great motivator piece also ties into something you said earlier, Trevor. It's authentic. When Marcus Freeman is coming out of the tunnel in College Station 2 years ago, and he's clapping his hands, and all of a sudden he turns around and just kind of goes off. That wasn't – maybe it was. That didn't look like a contrived, I'm going to do this. That looked like a guy that was just going to do what he always does, walk out there with your team, be excited, and lead them out of the tunnel. He doesn't often turn around and just go all in like that. I just think it hit him. It's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And the players responded to it. But I don't care. Like, to me, that's great. That's not what wins you that game. It was the motivation you get leading up to it to be able to prepare them to be motivated to play their best in the week leading up to that. If you didn't prepare Monday to Friday to win this game, I don't care how excited you were at that moment. You know what I mean? Like, so those things are cool and they look great and they make great Twitter clips, but it's the motivation Monday to Friday that he provided that allowed them to go into that game and be the more physical team, be the more disciplined team, be the better coach team in that particular game. And so I think that's something that he's certainly shown as well during his tenure. And I think the final, as far as his traits, like on the field, I think what he has shown is he can be a leader of a football team that responds very well to adversity. Notre Dame's had certainly some downs during his tenure, going back to 22 and the loss to back-to-back losses to start his tenure. Then you think about the loss to Stanford. You go into 23 and you've got that really tough stretch in the middle of the season, and you think how they responded with the beatdown of USC and Pitt and then they lose to Clemson and just blow out the next 3 teams they play. You go to 2024 and you lose to Northern Illinois, and you're like, how are they going to respond to this? We were talking like, is this team going to fold? And just the way they responded with 13 straight wins last year, just 2 heartbreaking losses, and then just literally destroyed everybody else they played. He's done a great job, Trevor, of saying, hey, I know how to push the right buttons to get this team to respond to adversity that is really self-created. It's to us, but then other circumstances that sometimes is not necessarily in their control. That is a strong characteristic and something that's absolutely needed in a top coach.
Yeah, Freeman-led teams have shown an exceptional ability to respond to adversity, and I think that is a direct reflection of Freeman's belief in his guys. He went on the Pivot podcast, and he talked about how, they're not afraid to play anybody. He was like, they asked him about that Texas A&M moment, about like, hey, man, like you were pretty fired up. It looked like you were getting ready to go strap on the pads and go out there and play a couple reps. And he was like, no, that's just because, like simply put, he was like, that's because I got like dogs with me. He was like, we got some dudes on our team, and people need to know that, and people need to understand that. And sometimes having that reaction is to like instill the belief in your team that it's like, hey, I, as your head coach, believe in your guys' ability to go out here and win this game and win it handily. If, to your point, you do all of the things that you have to do the week of preparation. And I watched you do all those things. Now is the culmination of all of it. I'm with you completely. He's done an exceptional job of responding well to adversity, motivating his team. And I think all of that has led him to the point where he has a strong track record on the field, and that's reflective in how he's built out his coaching staff. I think he has a strong hiring track record so far. But
yes,
as you guys are going to find out, this will be the conversation that carries us the rest of the way today.
Yeah, look, every coach makes bad hires. So when we say he has a track record of hiring good coaches, I don't want to hear, well, what about this one guy or that one guy? Because then I can point to Nick Saban making hires that were bad and Urban Meyer making hires that were bad. And I think for the most part, he's done a pretty good job of recognizing when he's made those mistakes, and he's moved on pretty quickly from those. Overall, I don't think you can argue that he's got a pretty good track record. Now, we could debate, is Joe Rudolph the best guy, whatever, but he's been a good coach that certainly, if he left after this season to go become the O-line coach of the Chicago Bears, would leave whoever replaces him with a pretty loaded depth chart. Mike Denrock is you lose a guy like Dylan McCullough, you replace him with Jaywan Sider, who's able to kind of keep things rolling. You lose an Al Washington and you replace him with Charlie Partridge, which is a great hire. You lose a guy like Mike Mickens, who has been your best assistant coach in your tenure, and you got and replace him with someone like Aaron Henry, who's got a great track record and was a defensive coordinator in the Big Ten the last 3 years. So far, he's been able to do that. But this is an interesting year, Trevor, because when you think about it, like this is the ultimate test of how good of he is at coaching hires. I don't think there's any doubt that he's done a good job of hiring coaches. Good job. This year we find out if he's done a great job, because we're going to find out if some of the coaches we have question marks about, whether and this is different. People have different questions. I'm not telling you that these are all. There's people that have questions about Mike Brown. People that have questions about Joe Rudolph. People that have questions about Chris Ash. People have questions about Marty Biaggi. I mean, there's always going to be coaches that somebody in the fan base is going to have some question marks about. Those questions get answered this year favorably, and this team goes out and plays their full potential. Then we can kind of put this to rest. So far, he's done a good job. The question now is, has he done a great job? And we think he did a great job replacing the coaches he lost on defense last year. But we're going to find out. And so it's somewhat of an incomplete grade, but I think we, at least of what we know, of what we can argue and point to, he's done a pretty good job in that regard. And this season will be very telling, which leads us, to the thing of, when you look at this 2024 team, and if they win it all because Chris Ash did a great job and Joe Rudolph does a great job and Mike Denrock does a great job and Marty Biaggi does need to do, the position coaches on defense, their guys played a high level, we're going to look back and say, this is now a scenario where Marcus Freeman has flat out 100% earned the trust of the fan base when he does make a hire, because we can know one of two things. One, it's a good chance he's going to make good hires when guys leave. And then two, if he doesn't, for the most part, he's a guy that will rectify that mistake. And if things don't go well from a coaching standpoint, and it's new coaches, we can say, hey, didn't make good hires. But if it's some of the older coaches, which is, maybe a concern we have, we can look back and say, hey, he didn't recognize this was ultimately a thing that was keeping him from that level until it was too late. So I think that's why this year is going to be such a telling year for him, Trevor, when it comes to the hiring aspect of coaches.
Without a doubt, it's going to be a defining year for this Notre Dame coaching staff, and it's going to be a defining year for Marcus Freeman. There's going to be some things that we have to see from him going into his 5th year, and he's in a very interesting spot. He's going into year 5, but it's also a year of first. It's his first time returning all 3 coordinators. It's his first time having a returning starting quarterback. It's his first time having, 2 returning captains on one side of the ball, and so it's a lot of firsts for him. And hopefully all of those new things, which are good things, coming back will help this program be able to start a little bit quicker than what they have done in recent years. Over the course of Marcus Freeman's tenure, that's been the biggest gripe, is his ability to start the season quickly. Sometimes it's who the opponent is. Sometimes it's the level of focus. You go and think back to 2022. They start out the year in a top 5 matchup against Ohio State and Columbus, and then they followed up with a loss against Marshall. In 2023, arguably from a result standpoint, that's the fastest they've started a season in the month of September. You go 4-0 up until that loss at home to Ohio State in a game that you just flat out shouldn't have lost. In 24, you beat Texas A&M. You get that big rah-rah speech beforehand, and then the following week you lose to Northern Illinois. And obviously we know what happened at the start of the season last year. This year, with all of those key returning pieces, Marcus Freeman is going to have to figure out a way to get this group started out much faster.
Yeah, if you go, I don't know that we knew it at the time because there was still a lot we were learning about him and that team. But if you go back to 23, you could see some of the chinks in the armor a little bit in those wins. It's a bit of a hindsight 2020 scenario that led to, I don't know that I observed it at the time. I didn't observe it at the time. It's more of, like I said, looking back, even the 23 start was kind of fool's gold a little bit, where they beat some teams that maybe weren't as good as we thought they were going to be that year. And some teams that we just knew weren't good. We knew that season that, that Central Michigan wasn't very good. We knew that obviously Tennessee State wasn't very good. I don't know that we knew that Navy was going to struggle as much as they did. I think that was the first year of Brian Newberry. We thought NC State was going to be, maybe a little bit better team that year. They finished 9-4, but their offense wasn't very good that season. A lot of us thought it was going to be better. They had Brennan Armstrong and Robert Denied offensive coordinator. They had done some great things scoring points at Virginia. There was an optimism that NC State was going to be a much better team that year. I think, like I said, I think their 9-4 record is a little bit misleading. They really only had one good win that year, in my opinion, and that was a home win over Clemson. And, but then again, that was also a 9-4 Clemson team. But you can see it. And then, of course, the Ohio State game comes, and they were a Sam Hartman run on 4th and 16 away from losing 3 straight games, including a road loss to Duke and a road loss to Louisville in a game that to this date is still the biggest loss of Marcus Freeman's career, like margin of victory. It was a 13-point loss, and anybody that remembers that game, it was not as close as the final score dictated. It was 33-13, and Notre Dame scored late in the game. Like, that was a beatdown. And then they rebounded from it and beat USC and Pitt and lost to Clemson. But when you look at his record, Trevor, it gets progressively better the deeper into the season that we go. Here's Marcus Freeman's record by month. We put August and September together, and we put December and January together because it's basically postseason. But in 4 years, and this is only including years where he was the head coach for the entire season, so I don't count the bowl game against the Fiesta Bowl. In the 4 years in which he is the head football coach, full season, they're 13-6 in August and September. 13-6. They're 11-2 in October. They haven't lost since 2023. They're 14-2 in November. Again, haven't lost since 2023. And they're 5-1 in the postseason, December, January. 3 playoff wins. They also have a win in the Gator Bowl. Also have a win in the Sun Bowl, and then their only loss being the national title game. So if you look at it, Marcus Freeman in August and September, 13-6. In the other 3-4 months that you play games, 30-5. And since 2023, so the last 2 years, one loss in October, November, December, or January, and that was the national title game to Ohio State. So we ask ourselves again, if you want to know what we need to see better from Marcus Freeman, it's start better. And starting better isn't just about wins and losses. It's also about getting your team prepared to say, hey, we're going to be able to continue to grow as a football team without having losses. You're not always going to play in peak form in September. I don't want you to be in peak form in September. I want you to keep doing what you've been doing in October, November, December, January, but at least get your team prepared enough and have a good enough read on your team to know that, hey, we're not really ready to do this yet. So let's make sure that we're preparing our team in a way that allows us to get wins in September and grow and build without having to suffer a loss to expose the things that we need to fix. So it's also a little bit of a being better at evaluating who you are, having a better sense of, hey, we know we're not ready when we get to go to Miami. We know we're not ready. So then having a game plan to say, we're struggling here, so we have to be able to address those things a little bit more. And that's obviously something they haven't been able to do that now in year 5 you want them to be able to do.
Yeah, agreed. His record in September is unlike the other months that he's been the head coach at Notre Dame. I mean, not losing a game in October or November since 2023 it's nothing short of exceptional. And it shows because in 2024 they rattled off 10 straight wins to finish off the regular season, and then in 2025 they did the exact same thing. But going back to the August-September thing, where it's 13-6 and at least one loss every single season, that kind of goes into what else we need to see from Marcus Freeman in year 5. Can he fix the problems before they cost the team games? Motivation, focus, coaching decisions, because you can attribute a lot of the losses you saw in September to that filing cabinet right there.
Yep.
Why did they lose to Marshall? Were they a better team than what some people believe them to be just because of name recognition? Absolutely. Should they have beaten Notre Dame in their home opener? No. Northern Illinois, veteran team. We talked about him at the time. Their running back was on your all-opponent team. You were talked about beforehand in the summers, like, hey, this guy's going to be a dude. Experienced team. Should they have beaten Notre Dame in their home opener? No.
Lost 5 games that year.
Yeah.
So somebody in the chat had said something earlier, and it's a fair thing to point out. Well, listen, you kind of got to give him a pass a little bit because of his first couple of years, and you're like, absolutely correct. I don't disagree with that at all, but at the same time, you have to look at it and say, but that's why we're talking about 2026 being different, because you have been through all those ups and downs. You have been through those struggles. And even in the most recent season of 2024, guys, in year 4, he's coming off a year where he led the team to a national championship game, and he wasn't able to recognize until after the third game of the year or third week of the year, second game, that, hey, we got a problem on defense. Actually, third game, fourth week of the season, because they didn't really make changes till after Purdue. Like, how did you not know going into the Miami game that there were certain flaws? And how did you not know in the 2 weeks of preparation for A&M that, hey, this may not be a great game plan? And so now you got to give Marcus Freeman credit for being able to step in and say, hey, defensive staff, we're going to fix this. And I'm confident. I've heard from enough sources inside the program to know that there was definitely a, hey, we got to figure stuff out on defense meeting. The severity and the tone of that meeting varies depending on who you talk to. But there was certainly a sit down, this is going to change conversation with the staff. Why did it take until after the Purdue game to fix that? Why when certain coaches weren't doing the job they needed to do, why did you wait till week 7 to address those concerns, or week 8 to address those concerns? That's all part of a head coach evolving and growing. And I think if you're going to point to a weakness for Marcus Freeman, I believe at times he's too trusting of his coaches. Because I've said this before, Marcus Freeman treats his coaches in a way that he wanted to be treated when he was an assistant coach. Hey, you hired me to do a job. Let me do the job. Well, you're where you are and who you are because you're not the typical coach, and you've got a way you want things done that may not be familiar with coaches. You don't just give Chris Ash complete control to do whatever without looking over his shoulder until he's given you the reason to believe that, as an example. And so I think those are things that I look at and say, he's got to show that. Like, don't wait until you've lost 2 games and embarrassed yourself against Purdue defensively to step in and make changes. There were some changes at halftime. And then, of course, after the game, there was I believe to be according to sources, a bit of a come to Jesus meeting and conversation with the defensive staff. And then after that, boom, they start playing better. Be able to recognize those things beforehand, and then don't give your coaches enough room to hang themselves, because then it's too late. Be there beforehand. And if that's something that he can do, then we're going to see this team have a much better chance of reaching its full potential, because it won't be we didn't know this was a problem until after we lost that game at BYU. That's the kind of thing. Well, we started, we were 6-0, we're blowing everybody out. Yeah, you didn't play anybody. You have to be able to say, hey, guys, and this is where Nick Saban was so good. We'd see games early in the year where they would beat a team by 30, and Nick Saban is in the postgame press conference mad. Because his thing is, I'm not looking at the scoreboard. I'm looking at this and I'm saying, we only did that because that team stinks. We're not making that play against this team. You've got a running game. You got a running back that gets spun around by a kid at Navy. 3 guys right there. He lands on top of him, goes and runs for a touchdown. Hey, guess what? We would not have seen that play in the playoffs if Notre Dame made the playoffs. That's not happening against Miami in a rematch. You can get away with that against Navy. You're not getting away with that. The bigger issue isn't what a great run by Jeremiah Love as a head coach. It's why were we allowing Navy to constantly hit our running backs in the backfield? Like, let's get that addressed, and not like, hey, 49-yard touchdown, wonderful. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here, Trev, is making sure that your coaches are better prepared to handle some of those things before they become L's. And that's what the great coaches do. And if Notre Dame's going to win a title, then obviously Marcus Freeman's got to prove that he's a great coach. We think he's a really good coach. We think he's one of the best in college football. But so far, there's only 4 coaches in college football right now that have won national championships at the Division I level, right? It's Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, Ryan Day, and Kurt Cignetti. I don't believe there's anybody else that's a head football coach that's won a national championship.
That's correct.
So he's not in – this isn't a knock on him. This is true for a lot of people. Can he do that? And because, like I said, Trev, you fix those things, whether it's knowing that your team wasn't focused for the Northern Illinois game and addressing it beforehand, whether it was, a team not being properly motivated for a game because they just suffered a big loss, like against Ohio State in 2022, whether it's, hey, there's some coaching decisions here that is not sitting well with our players, and being able to be on top of that before you started 1-2 and gave up over 30 points to Flip and Purdue. Those are things that are going to answer it. And that's going to lead to the final question, Trevor. And our final question of today's show is, of this segment is, when you look at Marcus Freeman, then we get to the point of, is he capable of leading this team to a championship? Can they win it all? My answer, Trevor, is this. I think Marcus Freeman has almost all of the attributes needed to be a championship coach. We talked a lot of them. But it's how well he answers those last couple questions about being able to address certain issues that have been kind of plagued you throughout. He's fixed so many things. Like we've said this before, he's not a guy that tends to make the same mistake twice. When they have a mix-up, they don't tend to – it doesn't happen again. They rebound from it. But there's a couple things that you look at, and they all tend to be how he interacts with his assistant coaches that say that's the final step. And if he can make sure that everybody's pointing in the same direction, everybody's on the same page, everybody understands his expectations, and everybody's getting that job done, and the defensive staff is – the defensive coordinator knows very well what you expect from him each week. And it doesn't take you 3 weeks to finally sit down and say, hey, man, that's not what we said we were going to do. I think that's the final step to say we think he can win it all, and he has won it all. I think that's where it is for me. That's the final hurdle for Marcus Freeman. Everything else, I think he's got.
We see that very much the same. It's, can he be proactive with these things, not reactive? Because that's what we've seen so far. You're going into year 5. You have enough experience under your belt. Here's how I look at this. I think Marcus Freeman is going to be the coach that brings home Notre Dame's 12th national championship. His ability to answer these questions will tell me if he's able to win that in a down year in college football, or if he's able to do that in a year like 2026, where we expect this to be a year where there's like 6 or 7 teams that could realistically have a shot at winning the title. As of today on May 19th, it wouldn't shock me at all if you said, hey, if we fast forward in time, somebody uses a time machine, comes back in time to now. They just came back from January 26th of 2027. Like, hey, Notre Dame won the title. Wouldn't shock me. Hey, Ohio State won the title. Wouldn't shock me. I'd be disappointed because it wasn't Notre Dame, but it wouldn't shock me. Same thing with Georgia, Indiana, Texas, Oregon, all the other contenders that we've talked about. But his ability to answer these questions will tell me whether or not Marcus Freeman can win a national championship in a year where it's going to be, I think, one of the more competitive years in college football since 2020 in the 2020s, or if it's going to be one of those because he has already gotten Notre Dame to this level, and I think that this level will be sustained. Does Notre Dame just win it like Michigan did in 2023 when it was a relative down year in college football? Not the same kind of Nick Saban Alabama team. The Heisman winner was on a team that went 9-4. Ohio State had a down year in 23. Notre Dame started the season off hot, also had a down year the rest of the season. So will it look more like that, or can they go out and win it in a year where college football is at one of its peaks? I think that's going to be a huge question going forward.
No doubt.
Ryan, we're rolling here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We just got done talking about what Marcus Freeman really has to answer for us moving forward in the 2026 season. Let's dive into the weeds here and talk about the offensive side of the ball. Now, this is a unit that's coming off of a really, really great year. Running back won the Doak Walker Award. Starting quarterback absolutely shattered the program record for passer rating in a single season. And when I mean shattered, I mean shattered it. I mean, just leaps and bounds above the 2 guys that he passed up. You set a modern-day record for points per game. You set a modern-day record in yards per play. You're doing all of these things, but we're still left with some questions that this unit, this coaching staff has to answer. And that's where we start this conversation with the offensive coaching staff.
What's interesting, Trevor, is it is wild that this coaching staff on offense does not get a lot of respect. I think there's people that respect Mike Denrock, but there's not a lot of people that sit there and want to argue, hey, Mike Denrock's an elite offensive coordinator. And here's a perfect example. So our guys at Crane and Company, Crane and Cone, it's Crane and Cone now, did a show where they brought in a young coach, a guy that evaluates coaching. I think he's been a successful high school coach, and I'm not disparaging the guy at all. They do a breakdown of the top 5 offensive minds in college football. And it's like Lincoln Riley and Steve Sarkisian and the guy at Vanderbilt. And I can't remember who the other 2 were, but it was like no Mike Denrock. And no Mike Shanahan either, which I thought was interesting. And I said, look, here's the list of coaches who have had 2 offenses that have ranked in the top 5 in scoring offense and yards per play in 2 of the last 3 years. Here's the list. 1, Mike Denrock. That's the list. And I think Notre Dame fans fall victim to this as well, because here's what Mike Denrock is not. He's not like this super creative, ooh, look at that awesome, wicked, well-designed play call kind of guy. And especially young coaches, and this guy's a young guy, and I say that because that's how I was when I was a young coach. Let me show how wicked smart I am with, hey, coach, what if we did this, 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 and this? And the smart coaches I worked with were like, well, that's great, but couldn't we get to that this way? And, in something we already do, or I'm trying to reinvent the wheel. And for someone to say, well, Lincoln Riley's a better play caller than Mike Denrock, based on what? Well, back in 2021, yeah, bro, that's a long time ago. Yeah, a long time ago. And it's because he doesn't have like that creative offense. Mike Denrock is someone who says, we're not going to have a million plays. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to be really good at what we do. And I heard somebody sent me something one time where some Bama player talk about, we kind of knew what they were going to do at LSU in 2023. And it's like, well, you still couldn't stop it. I mean, they didn't lose that game because of their offense. because there's two ways to look at it. One is, hey, I'm going to do all these super creative plays. And another one is, look, our guys are going to know exactly what they're doing and they're going to be really good at it. And then we're going to find ways. And you've heard Notre Dame players talk about this. Mylan Graham had an interview recently. They asked him to compare the Notre Dame and Ohio State coaching staffs. He says, one thing is, he's talked about like they do a great job of finding out what we're good at and then putting us in positions to where we can get into good matchups. And he's more focused on that than he is, let me run 97,000 plays and get that call sheet that I've got to open up and it's like this big and I look like the next Sean McVay. Like, it's like, to believe what some people say about Mike Denrock, you've got to believe that he has lucked into the fact that at two schools, the last two schools he's coached at, they have set school records in yards per play. Yes, the record for yards per play at LSU was not set by the 2019 LSU offense. It was initially set. It was shattered 4 weeks later. And it wasn't even close. Trev, if you go back and look, and LSU was a great offense in 2019. I'm not trying to sit here and say that the 2023 offense was better than the 2019 offense. I think a case can be made in some ways when you consider how bad the offense was. But the LSU offense in 2019 set a school record at 7.9 yards per play. Notre Dame set a school record this year at 7.3. The Joe Burrow offense led by Joe Brady in 2019 was at 7.9 yards per play. That record got obliterated in 2023. 8.4 yards per play for LSU in 2023. Somehow lucked into that. Sets the record at Notre Dame. His first stint, only his second year as an offensive coordinator, Notre Dame sets a school record in yards per play. He leaves, goes to Cincinnati. They luck into becoming a playoff team somehow, because apparently that's kind of how Mike Denrock has success, is just it's luck. And then goes to LSU, does that, comes to Notre Dame, and in year two here, they obliterate previous scoring records and previous yards per play records. Must be luck that he keeps doing this at every stop he's at, and is still not considered a top 5 offensive coordinator. Why? As I told you, because it's not flashy. It's productive, but not flashy. And you'll have people in chat, oh, Denrock's got to do better here. He's got to do better there. I'm like, okay, every coach has bad games, including Mike Denrock. But I'm just going to have a hard time respecting your opinion if you're going to try to tell me that Mike Denrock's not one of the 5 best offensive coordinators in football. You can say he's not one of the 5 most creative minds in college football. That's fine. But I care more about results than I do, ooh, this looks like a cool play that I can draw up on my post-game breakdown to show the wicked creative mind of Mike Denrock. Lincoln Riley had cooler design plays when Notre Dame played USC. Guess whose offense was better? Guess whose offense consistently put up more yards per play, and more points? Notre Dame's. I'm just saying. So it is interesting, and I think that's true for a lot of the staff. For Notre Dame, nobody talks about Gino Guidugli being one of the best quarterback coaches in the business, and I understand why, but like his track record's pretty good. He gets very little attention. It's interesting to kind of watch it play out. But when you look at Mike Denrock, I think that's kind of where he started. Is like the guy doesn't get the respect, and this is a year where they've got to go out and earn it, because the expectations are as high for this Notre Dame offense as any offense he's ever coached. Because nobody went into 2023 thinking that LSU's offense was going to be that good. I think they thought it was going to be good, but not, hey, we're going to shatter records that were set by Joe Burrow's offense. I don't think anybody went into the season thinking that.
No, I sure as heck didn't. Not at all. I'm with you. I thought it was going to be good with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, Jaden Daniels coming in. But to your point about him not getting enough respect, and this is not me agreeing with it. This is what I think my explanation for those who don't have, like, I guess you could say, the depth of knowledge to understand why he's a top 5 offensive coordinator in the game right now. It's because outside of that 2023 LSU offense, some of the premier positions didn't put up those sexy numbers that people want to see. For Notre Dame's case last year, it's like, oh, Mike Denrock's a great offensive coordinator. Why'd their leading receiver have 600 yards? The Cincinnati offense was so great. Desmond Ridder was fine. Like, Mike Denrock's this great offensive coordinator. CJ Carr didn't even get to 2,800 yards passing. It's because those premier positions didn't stat pad. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why. Jaden Daniels didn't stat pad. He was just that good. that season.
Well,
But
and they
notice
also
how
had to play him 4 quarters of every game because they were in every game because their defense sucked.
100%.
I mean, we pointed this out. Jaden, if CJ Carr had the LSU 2023 defense, he would have thrown for almost 500 yards against Arkansas. Because he was at almost 290 yards. He was over 290 yards at halftime, played one series of the second half, had a couple passes, ended up with like 3. What was he at, Trev, in that game? I think he was over 3 in that game, right? Actually, I'll look that up here real quick. But it's like, well, look, dude, what would he have done if their defense was as bad as the LSU defense in 2023? He'd have had to stay in that game and keep chucking. And he would have finished with, over 400 yards that game. He finished with 354. I think he was at like 293 at halftime. Means he threw for 61 yards in the second half. Jaden Daniels would have thrown for 500 yards that game because he would have had to be in the game for 4 quarters in a competitive football game. So there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think that's part of it. But because I still think fans focus too much on stats that don't truly define how good you are, that being yards. And I've said, look at yards per play, look at the other things that are more telling than total yards. I've pointed this out from my own career before. 2002, when I was at Muhlenberg College, we had a really good offense. We averaged 40 points a game in the regular season, made the college football playoffs for the first time in school history, the first 10-win season, I think, in school history, like pretty good year. We only averaged like 350 yards a game because our average starting field position was the 48-yard line. So, like when your defense and special teams are that good, yeah, you're going to score a lot of points, but you're not going to have a lot of yards because you can only go 52 yards per drive on average. And we also had a kicker that could nail like 48. He had, I think, Chris Reed had like 6 or 7 40-plus yard field goals that year at D3. So, I'm watching Notre Dame for the last 2 years, can't kick a 30-yard field goal with any consistency. Well, we'd get the ball at the 48, drive 20 yards, and get points. You know what I mean? On average. So that's why I say yards per play, different things like that tell me a whole lot more than total yards. But that's to your point, Trevor's. Well, CJ Carr only ranked, in college football last year. CJ Carr ranked, what was he in passing yards per game, Trevor? Let's look at it. CJ Carr ranked 47th in yards per game. Okay, yeah, I get that, but he ranked 5th in passer rating. And he ranked tied for second in yards per attempt behind only Drew Mestamaker by 0.1. And he was tied with Diego Pavia and had more than Fernando Mendoza, more than Julian Sand, and every other Heisman finalist. And he was tied with the other one, Diego Pavia. Stats like that show you how effective it was. But anyway, the point is the offensive staff deserves a lot of credit. Having said that, there have also been some big games where the offense didn't carry their end of the bargain. Miami last year. The offense is not why they lost to Texas A&M. I mean, that ain't why they lost that game. Miami that is one of the reasons. Both coaching staffs, sides of the ball, offense and defense, deserved blame for losing the Miami game. The Ohio State game. The Penn State game, first half, not great. So you can point to games, Trevor, like, okay, yeah, he's a great offensive coordinator, but there's this game. And I'm like, okay, those are fair points. And you can't say, well, everybody has those, because we could also point to teams that have thrived in the playoffs. Look at Indiana this year offensively. Excellent in the postseason against good teams. So I do understand it to a degree, but now they got to prove that they can get to that top point. And get to that high point. And that's when you look at Mike Denrock, that's something he's got an opportunity to show this year that, hey, I am that guy. And how does he prove that? Be that guy in Provo, be that guy on November 7th, be that guy on November, 21st, and be that guy in December and January. That's the final step for Mike Denrock is that. Oh, Brian Haynes is a great defense coordinator. Yeah. He's been great in the postseason, except that one time in South Bend, where Mike Denrock had their number in a lot of ways. So there's been those good moments, but but nobody remembers what you did in the first round. They're going to remember what you did in the title game. Fair. That's why you come to Notre Dame. That's totally fair. So now it's about doing it on those stages as well. I think that's the final piece for Mike Denrock to finally get the respect that I think he's earned as one of the best offensive coordinators in college football.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's going to be evaluating him almost in Notre Dame's offense on a drive to drive basis in those big moments. We've seen Notre Dame's offense be able to turn it on in the second half. Don't wait until the second half to turn it on. Miami this past year, Penn State last year, Ohio State last year. There's been games where it's like, okay, where was this offense the first 30 minutes of the game? Because we might not have to have a discussion about what great second half comeback either put them in a spot to win or won them the football game. But Mike Denrock's not the only coach that has some questions around him. Talk about Joe Rudolph. He's a great recruiter. But up to this point, we've said that this is a defining year for him. He is a good offensive line coach and a great / elite recruiter. Can he be an elite offensive line coach, though? That's going to be the question.
Very fair. We're even having it again in the chat now. There's this one side or the other conversation with Joe Rudolph. There's the people that just, no matter what they do, they're just not going to give him credit for a job well done. He won't get credit for you've had guys get injured. He's been able to put quality lines together, not great lines, quality lines together, despite losing Jagasol each of the last 2 preseasons, despite losing Ashton Craig each of the last 2 years, who's a very talented center. Billy Schrout has missed time each of those last 2 seasons. And they say, hey, they kept it rolling. And I'm like, he absolutely deserves credit for that. And people won't give him credit for that, to be a good offensive line coach. And they want to make it seem like he sucks. He doesn't suck. Then you have the other side, and that's what's going on in the chat right now, of the people that want to run cover for him constantly. And I think part of that is there's everybody has different reasons, but I think part of it is because it's a counter reaction to the some of the negativity that's just absurd. Like, well, let me push back and be equally absurd in defending him. So, like, there's somebody in the chat right now who's saying, like, he's shown the ability to adjust. Look at starting Rocco Sam Pendleton over Rocco Spiller and moving Coogan to backup center. Those were dumb moves. Like, starting Pendleton over Rocco was dumb. Like, that was a bad move. It's why Freeman and Denrock forced him to keep Rocco in the starting lineup. I was told that when Billy came back from injury, he was going to put Rocco in the bench again and keep Pendleton in the starting lineup. And he was overruled. That's what I was told. And it's like, what? That's not adjusting. That's reacting. And so, like, now you're running cover in the opposite direction. And we just can't have an honest conversation about Joe Rudolph in a lot of instances. Here's the truth about Joe Rudolph. He has shown the ability to react well, to push the right buttons when injuries happen and things happen, to say, how can I get this unit to play together in the face of adversity? He deserves credit for that. And if you're going to try to take credit away from him for that, then I have a hard time respecting your objectivity in this conversation. I don't believe it was Mike Denrock that forced him to put Charles Jagasol at left tackle for the title game. I believe that was Joe Rudolph's decision. And it was the right decision. So there have been plenty of things where Joe Rudolph has shown, hey, I'm a good offensive line coach. On the field, forget the recruiting piece. I'm a good offensive line coach. But at Notre Dame, that's not good enough. And that's where I think I wish we could stay in that lane. I wish we could all agree that he's done a good job at Notre Dame. He has. But he hasn't done a good enough job. And I don't mean that as like, well, he hasn't had the right talent. I mean, literally, there are things he has done with the talent he has where he didn't get the most out of that group. You can't tell me that Joe Rudolph had the offensive line prepared. I had literally had someone give a response on our gave us a 1-star review because we criticized Emil Wagner, but he was mad that we criticized Joe Rudolph for how Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp played against Miami. As if he did everything right and the player – that's the two extremes we're dealing with here. But if we could all come to the middle for a second and say, look, he's done a good job. There's been things he's done that we could point to and say, job well done. But you should also, if you're honest and objective, point to things and say, there's a reason NFL scouts and NFL draft people keep saying, I'm shocked. Once I dove into the film, I'm surprised at how mediocre this Notre Dame offensive line was and how much Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price had to kind of make things happen in spite of the line. Well, sometimes it's been injury related, but not always. And so I think we need to have an honest conversation to be able to say that he's done a good job. But when it's O-line you and you're a program that says word line driven, you can't just have a good offensive line coach. You need to have a really good minimum offensive line coach. I just watched Bob Bostad with an offensive line that doesn't have nearly the talent that this Notre Dame offensive line will have, coach circles around Miami's and Alabama and Oregon's coaching staffs with how they played. Guy that Joe Rudolph didn't think was good enough to start for him went to Indiana and won MVP of a playoff game. That's what an elite coach does. This is why I say Joe Rudolph has a chance to prove this year that he belongs in that category. He's a good O-line coach. If you're going to say otherwise, I just can't have a conversation with you because we're so far off. It's like we're arguing. You think the sky is blue and I think it's green, or I think it's purple, or you know what I mean? Like you think grass is green and I'm going to sit here and argue that no, it's fuchsia. Like we're not even in the same universe right now. But if you're also going to try to tell me he's an elite coach, we're going to have a similar, we're not even on the same page here. He's been good, but they need better. And that's what he has an opportunity to prove. So far this offseason, I don't have a single beef with what the different moves we've seen Joe Rudolph make this offseason. Not a one. But now, can you get this line to play together, to play with physicality, to play to their full potential? That's what we need to see next. We haven't seen that, whether it's with injured guys or the starters. We have not seen that with consistency. And that's the opportunity he has to prove this year because it's now his line. This is going to be, year 4 for him? This is your group. Now's your chance to show, hey, that Driscoll guy's been way too hard on me. Watch what I'm about to do. Right? Year before, I watched Bob Bostad's offensive line get their butt kicked by Al Washington's defensive line. I mean, so again, everybody evolves and gets their line to it. Takes time to build things to a certain point. Well, he's built it now. Now it's time to elevate it. And that's the opportunity that's in front of him to where he either solidifies our view of him, which is he's just good, but he's not great, or he shuts us up and says, no, I'm one of the best in the business. That's the opportunity Joe Rudolph has in front of him this year.
Yeah, without a doubt, and the same could be said for Mike Brown, Notre Dame's wide receiver coach. He's another guy that has a lot to prove this year, and this will be a defining season for Mike Brown. In a very similar light, Mike Brown is stepping into a season where everything he's done up to this point has been good. He is somebody that, very similar to kind of like an Al Washington type, people are willing to build and formulate their entire opinion around Mike Brown based on what he's done on the recruiting trail. And they're willing to let that trump what he's done on the field as a football coach, which has been some really, really good things. Now this season, we're going to find out if he can go from being a really good wide receivers coach and have a really good wide receiver room to an elite level wide receiver room. And there's things that we've talked about on the show before about just and inconsistencies that we saw in the blue gold game, fighting for the football, consistency, getting off the line with urgency. I appreciate and I love everything that Mike Brown did with them from a cultural standpoint in that room. They have the disposition to go out and block the way that receivers should be blocking on the perimeter when you have big play running backs like Jeremiah Love. Now it's time to be an elite wide receiver. Come off the line with consistency. Continue fighting for the football. I'm going on now my 3rd year of talking about what potential Cam Williams can have in this offense. Now it's time to get players like that going, and that's what he has to prove. But we also can't sit here and pretend like he's done nothing up to this point either. Joe Rudolph and Mike Brown are very, very similar in those regards.
You don't get to the national title game in spite of 2 offensive coaches aren't good. You just don't. And that's true for Joe Rudolph and like Mike Brown. They didn't put up great numbers in 2024. But when did the Notre Dame receivers play their best football? Regular season, what was the best game they played from a blocking standpoint and a big catches standpoint? I would argue it was the A&M game.
Yeah.
I mean, Bo Collins had a great catch in that game that led to a win. Jaden Greathouse making clutch 3rd down receptions, blocking their tails off in that game. Then they sucked the next week against Northern Illinois, but they were ready for the big games. They played their tails off against LSU. And then you go to the postseason. You have 3 different one. I think in the regular season, did they have a single 100-yard game in the regular season? The receivers?
No.
And I think they had 3 or almost 3 in the postseason.
I think they had almost 3. Faison went for 89 against Indiana.
Really close. He had 89, 7 for 89. And then you had Greathouse had a 100-yard game in the semis and a 100-yard game in the championship game. Like, they were ready to play in their biggest moments. You know, I think when you point to the receivers, the receivers are not the reason they lost to Miami or Texas A&M. I mean, I thought they played great in both of those games. Clutch catches, big time catches, blocking down the field. The mistakes that were made were more of that ball should never have gone there. Yeah, of course, Jaden Greathouse couldn't make that block, or Jordan Faison couldn't make that block. That you don't throw into that look, and there's a reason why. So I think there's been some mistakes as well. Just, I don't know, for whatever reason he doesn't want to push Jaden Greathouse over Will Pauling. I still think that was a mistake. So no coach is perfect, and Mike Brown has to show that. Are you an elite receivers coach or just a pretty good one? But he's got an interesting thing where he's the opposite of Joe Rudolph. Like, he gets dinged. Nobody gives him credit for how good of a position coach he is because he doesn't recruit very well. Where Joe Rudolph never gets enough credit as a recruiter, in my opinion, because he's not, because of how well he coaches or the perception of the lack thereof. But I think this is a big year for Mike Brown to show, hey, I'm a really good developer of receivers. But in order to do that, I need to see some of those young guys break out. I need to see a Cam Williams or a Micah Gilbert break out. I need to see you take those Ohio State kids to another level. But even then, it's like, if it's just those two kids, you say, well, did he do that or did Brian Hartline do that? And he's reaping the rewards of what Brian Hartline did. So that's why I say, Trev, this is a big opportunity for him. Getting the rotation right, making sure that's done right. I think that was his biggest mistake last year, was just how he handled the rotation. I think how the receivers played the game was pretty good. There's some things here that I want him to continue to work on, compete for the ball better, and not take as many plays off. But that's also byproduct of not having a deep enough rotation. That won't be an issue this year. Clearly, the Notre Dame coaching staff did not have confidence in their 4th, 5th, and 6th receivers last year once Greathouse went down. That's why they didn't play him much in the big games. Okay, well, this year, that's not an issue. So it's a big year for Mike Brown to show, hey, for him to, he's either going to get more pressure on him and more criticism because the receivers don't step up, or this is the year that I think people finally realize this guy's a pretty good receivers coach. And I think that's what's in front of him this season. Same with recruiting. Can you finish well? Can you go get Julius Jones Jr. and maybe add a third guy in an Osani Gales or somebody like that? Those are all things that we're going to find out. And then you look at it too, is I'm still fascinated. Jaywan Sider gets a ton of love and respect, as he should. So did Dylan McCullough. But the last one is like, Gino Guidugli will have developed 3 quarterbacks that are going to be Power 4 starters this year.
And one of them is a preseason Heisman favorite winner on FanDuel right now, and people still just don't talk enough about him. I think that's crazy.
Yeah. Now, to a degree, I somewhat understand to a degree. He's not a guy that we hear from very often. This is part of the in my issue, some of the issues that I have with the Notre Dame media team. We see Gino Guidugli like once or twice a season. And so we don't get a lot of those opportunities to have him on shows and different things like that. He's got a bit of a laid back personality. And I think when you look at Gino Guidugli, it's his first couple years. How much credit can you give him for developing Sam Hartman, who didn't actually play as well at Notre Dame as he did at Wake Forest? And I think Gino Guidugli gets a ding for that, where I don't think that was on Gino Guidugli. I think that was more on the offensive line and the receiving core, which was not coached by Mike Brown. The O-line was, but it was the first year of Joe Rudolph's tenure. 24, I mean, Riley Leonard, I thought he did a pretty good job of getting the most out of Riley Leonard. But how much credit are you going to give a guy who coaches an already developed Riley Leonard? I kind of put more of Riley Leonard's success onto Mike Denrock for building the offense around him. So it's understandable. And then this past year, well, yeah, of course, CJ Carr, Grandpa Lloyd Carr, how much credit are we going to give him for that? Okay, that's fine. But now in year 2, the jump that CJ Carr makes or doesn't make is going to reflect a lot on Gino Guidugli. And so I think that's where we either start to say, well, maybe he's just kind of getting by with talented players, or, hey, he deserves a much bigger level of praise than he gets. I think it's the latter. I think he doesn't get enough respect for the job he's done. And I think this year he's going to either just stay where he is and just obscurity. Like, we never hear his name being mentioned as an offensive coordinator somewhere and, somewhere else. And you're like, dude, why? Like, he's been a part of some really good offenses. And I think the reasons we just discussed, I think Gino Guidugli becomes a hot commodity this year if things go the way we think they're going to go for the Notre Dame offense. But then also Kenny Minchie goes and handles his business at Kentucky. And then Steve Angeli comes back and continues doing what he did last year. I think all of a sudden we start saying maybe this Gino Guidugli guy knows what he's doing, because 3 of his pupils are now starting at Power 4 schools and playing well. And his best pupil is, a front runner for the Heisman Trophy and has expanded his game. Now, if CJ Carr is just a same guy he was last year, just a year older, then I don't know that I give Gino Guidugli a lot of credit for that. Your job is to take the next level. And there's been some things along the way. You're like, how does a quarterback coach not recognize that his quarterback is giving away run pass through for an entire game against Texas A&M? Like, I get those criticisms, but there's been a lot more really good stuff than not so far for Gino Guidugli. Same thing for Mike Brown. There's things I'm going to criticize Mike Brown for, but it's like we also then need to be able to praise him for the much longer list of good things he's done. I think Gino Guidugli's that way. Joe Rudolph's that way. And so that's why I say is sometimes when I'll criticize a coach, it's like some people just want to jump onto that and just do nothing but criticize that coach and then ignore the times that I praise that coach. And that goes for people that don't like when I criticize either. They'll ignore that I've praised the guy for a month, and then the one bad game his unit had, and I criticize the job he did that game, they turn it into, something that, that's some crybaby stuff. But that's where I look at it, Trevor, is I don't think they get enough credit, but this is the year that they prove that they deserve that credit because the roster is there. I mean, Mike Brown's got 15 scholarship receivers, and all of them have starting talent at the Power 4 level. What are you going to do with it?
That's
Same thing with Joe Rudolph. What are you going to do with it?
That's the biggest thing, all encompassing. That's how all of these coaches can answer some of those questions. That is my biggest question with Mike Brown. I have not been shy around the fact that I have been a big time critique of what Mike Brown has done at this point. Not that would overcome my acknowledgement of the things that he has done, but there are some things that he has to do to show me this year that he is the guy to take Notre Dame to that next level as far as their wide receivers are concerned. That doesn't mean that this year my expectation is one of their wide receivers goes out and wins the Biletnikoff, or they have 2 wide receivers over 1,000 yards this year. Wouldn't be upset if either of those things happened. But that's not my expectation. It's one of the reasons why I love the portal pickups that they went out and got. They got young, unproven guys that needed molded. They went out and got Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham, who had like a career 9 combined receptions or something. Like that's why I love those moves. Because in that same light, we've also talked about, when Bo Collins got to Notre Dame, he was basically the Bo Collins he was at Clemson. It's like, so then what was Mike Brown's impact on Bo Collins? Like, can somebody point to me the areas of Malachi Fields' game that improved from when he went from Virginia to when he went to Notre Dame? Or was he the same really, really good guy? Jordan Faison has taken great strides. You have to credit Mike Brown for that. I'm not going to go back to 2023 and say, that was all Chancey Stuckey and, Mike Brown just, has made his entire career off of those things. You know what I mean?
Hold on. You're going to give a guy credit for developing a former high school quarterback who came here to play lacrosse, that's turned himself into a team captain, a leading receiver, and a guy is that impressive? Like, I don't know what you're talking about, Trevor.
Oh, it is impressive.
I mean, can't anyone just take a former high school quarterback who came here as a walk-on and came here to play lacrosse and turn him into a big-time Power 4 receiver? That's not an easy thing to do? Or is that what you're trying to tell me?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Wow. It's bold.
I know, man.
Take their Cotton.
It is.
Full strategy there, Cotton.
See if it pays off for him. He's not going to be able to see very well with that, Cotton. No. I'm with you, though, man. Now, the next step for Mike Brown in his evolution.
No, I'm saying that to be – let's, really think about what we just said. The reason I brought that up and made that, trying to be funny was, do you realize what you just said? Like, Mike Brown took a guy who – and now, again, Chancey Stuckey had him actually, no, hold on. Yeah, Chancey Stuckey had him the first year, and he did some good things, but we've seen him really grow his game in the years since. I mean, his first 100-yard game came with Mike Brown actually coaching him, which I think was interesting. But that's an impressive thing to build that. And like I said, I don't think he gets enough credit for those type of things. I just saw somebody put something on the board. I think it's like CBS Sports said something like they have Jordan Faison as some highly regarded NFL draft prospect or something like that. Now, he's talented. No coach takes a kid that doesn't have talent and turns him into a high NFL draft pick. That's how good of a coach I am. This kid came to me running a 4.9, and I turned him into a first-round NFL draft. No. You take talent. It's your job to get the most out of that talent, and I think in a lot of ways he's done that. Now, not every way. I want to see him do that more with Jaden Greathouse. I want to see him do that with the Ohio State kids and Cam Williams. That's the big one for me. But yeah, I don't want to just glance over the Jordan Faison piece as a big feather in his cap for the job that he has done as a developer of players.
Oh, without a doubt. I'm with you completely. The next step in his evolution is do what you did with Jordan Faison with a lot of the guys that we just mentioned, with Cam Williams, with Mylan Graham, with Quincy Porter, with Micah Gilbert, with Logan Saldate, with Elijah Burris, with Devin Fitzgerald, with Caden Finley. You guys get the point. That's the next step in his evolution. But because of what he's done with Jordan Faison, we have reason to believe that he's going to do that. Now it's about going out and doing it.
Yep.
Because what Mike Brown doesn't want to be, and this isn't me saying that I think he will be, but what he doesn't want to be in 2027 and 2028 is the guy that's like, but remember what I did with Jordan Faison? And it's like, yeah, man, like that was a while ago. Can you now do it with the high level of talent that's on this roster? Luckily this year, in the year that he has a lot to prove, that will be a defining year for him, he has Jordan Faison to help teach some of the things that he learned from Mike Brown in that room. But it's going to be a big year for him. I agree.
There's no doubt. Let's just recap, Trev, just kind of what the expectations are for the offensive coaches and what they need to do to get this offense to play at championship level football. Not continue to break records, play championship football, which will be defined by not that you put a 50 spot on Wisconsin and hung 60 something on Rice and all. It's you go into Provo and you do what you need to do. You handle your business against Miami, you handle your business against SMU, and this team goes in the postseason and you handle your business. What does that look like? For Mike Denrock, it's this. It's number one, can you get all your coaches on the same page, steered in the right direction? You're now year 3 of your offense. All the coaches know what your expectations are. You know, all the players know what your expectations are. Can you push the right buttons to get the most out of this offense? Which means making the improvements needed to make. I don't know what the answers are for red zone offense. If I knew every single answer, I would take it over to Notre Dame and I'd say, get me a job as an analyst because here's the answers to all your questions. I'm just kidding. I would never go to Notre Dame and ask for a job. I'm making a point that, like, I'm not telling you that I have all the answers for how to fix something. What I'm telling you is that's broken and they need to fix it. The guys that make a lot more money than I do to do that need to fix it. But it's Mike Denrock be able to put his finger on the pulse of the red zone offense and say, how do we fix it? Without sacrificing other areas. Well, you get better in red zone, but you got way worse on third down. Right? Being good at fixing both of those things. Being able to adapt to the current personnel. One thing that he's done throughout his tenure is be able to build the offense around the personnel of his team. And Mike Denrock in the last 3 years has run 3 completely different offenses. The offense he ran at LSU in 23 looks nothing like either one of his Notre Dame offenses. His Notre Dame 24 offense looks nothing like his 25 offense and vice versa. Why? Because he's had different strengths for each team. In 24-25 with Riley Leonard quarterback, they were inside zone and duo was their bread and butter, and mid zone was a counter to that. It was 25. You don't have a quarterback that can do that. You've got 2 explosive playmaking running backs with great vision and cutting ability. So mid zone becomes their bread and butter. Inside zone and duo are counters to that. They throw the ball more effectively and differently, much more down the field. CJ Carr threw the ball, I think, about 10 times more down the field, 20 yards or more, in 12 games than what Riley Leonard did in 16 games the year before. That's what great offensive coordinators do. Can you do that again with this version of the offense and get it clicking maybe in those bigger games? That's the expectation there. For Joe Rudolph, it's you've recruited your butt off. Now get them to play to their talent level. All around game. Not this game they were good at run blocking but not pass blocking. This game they were good at pass blocking but not run blocking. Put it all together and get the most out of this line. I don't expect them to look like a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line in weeks 1, 2, and 3. They may dominate, but there's things you can point to and say, yeah, they dominated that bad line, but they got to get better here. But by the time we get to when it matters, that's when I want it to be clicking. And then you play well down the stretch. For Mike Brown, getting the right players on the field in the right spots, the rotation the right way, and be able to get this unit to improve in the two areas that they need to improve the most, which is playing with more urgency and attacking the football better. Two very important areas. The only guys he's had do that well at Notre Dame are guys that came to Notre Dame with that ability. Jaden Greathouse and Malachi Fields. And then when it comes to Gino Guidugli, can you take the areas where CJ needs to improve, pocket management, read progression, things like that, and can you get him to that next level as a quarterback? Not just his overall feel, but there's a noticeable, hey, how CJ handles the pocket footwork-wise is clearly better this year. He's getting coached up to do that. And then when it comes down to, Jaywan Sider, keep doing what you're doing. Keep getting this unit to play at a high level. The only advice I'd give to him is, can you do it with a more expanded rotation without studs, without 2 first-round draft picks? We're going to find out, but it's kind of like, we'll get that unit to keep, playing at a high level, getting the most out of the players like you've done. Those are things we look at with this group, Trev. They prove those things, then they'll be that type of offensive staff that now starts getting the respect it deserves for being a very outstanding staff led by a great OC and then very, very good position coaches that all of a sudden start getting some of that love and interest from people. And that's something that I want to see from this group. And that's going to be the key to whether or not they are a truly elite staff.
Brian, let's switch gears here and talk about the Notre Dame defensive coaching staff here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And we just got done talking about the offensive coaching staff and some of the things that they have to prove and some of the questions that we have going into the 2026 season. Defense is absolutely going to be a hot topic of conversation because there's some important questions that they have to answer. Now, when you look at this group overall, the expectations are sky high, and it's understandable as to why. I put out an article, and this is just really highlighted players in the 2 deep. Guys like Leonard Moore, Don Schuler, they're 5 linebackers, the rotation of the D-line, what it's projected to be, the incoming transfers that are going to play a big role, DJ McKinney, Tion Gray, Francis Brew. There's over 8,100 returning snaps of experience from just last year, just 2025. You have a defense that is absolutely loaded with talent. You have a cornerback that is fresh off of a unanimous All-American season as a true sophomore. You have one of, if not the best safety tandems in the entire country, the best and deepest rotation at linebacker in the entire country. So the expectations, understandably so, are very, very high for this defense. But that doesn't mean that we're at the point now on May 19th where we can be like, yeah, they'll just, do what they do, and, their defense will be their defense. Because early on last season, it showed that we can't just rely solely on talent. And fact of the matter is the offense was better in 2025 than what the defense was.
No question.
It's a very interesting side of the ball, for sure.
And I would argue that in some of the big games in 24, the offense was better than the defense at times, or at least on the same page. So here's the reality. The expectations for the defense are sky high. Sky high. We just read the Athlon thing. Athlon ranks Notre Dame as having the number 2 D-line, number 2 linebacker room, and number 1 secondary in all of college football. And I don't disagree with them. That's not Irish Breakdown's opinion. It's not. I mean, I don't know that I'd have the D-line number 2, to be honest with you. I don't know that I would. I'd have to think about it, but there's a couple. I mean, Oregon, there's a couple D lines that I'd have. Maybe they should be ranked at Notre Dame. I would say I think Notre Dame's offense linebacker should be number 1, but I'd be curious to who their number 1 is. But the point is, they probably rank their position groups as a group higher than what I would, because I don't know that I'd have their D line number 2. So that's an outside source that it feels that way. There's no excuse for this defense not to be elite this season. Now, with that comes a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations for the offense, for the defensive staff. I don't know that anybody's sitting here talking about how Notre Dame might have the best offense of college football this year. I don't have it. It's, look what Texas is going to do, Oregon with Dante Moore. And I'm like, yeah, Notre Dame scored more points than all those teams last year. Well, that's because of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Is it though? I mean, I could point you some numbers from CJ Carr that look pretty dang good. So those are the conversations that you have, but nobody talks about that with the offense. Fair or not, we just, we don't think it necessarily is fair. The expectation with the defense is flat out, they're supposed to be elite. And if they're not, then we're going to circle back, and there's two people's names we're going to be talking about a lot. It's why did Marcus Freeman not get this addressed, and why isn't Chris Ash able to get the most out of this defense? So I think that's when you look at it, Trev, is this is expected to be sky high. The other reason why expectations are very high is because you look at what the defense did in the final 8 games of the year. 11.8 points per game, 27.3 yards per game, 3.9 yards per play in the last 8 games. Those are all top 5 to 8 numbers nationally. And the defense finished in, I think, 6th or 7th in efficiency, depending on who you look at last year. Even with the first 3 games included, they still finished the top 5 or 7. Now, I would argue that they kind of just beat up on a lot of bad teams. Even Pitt, who had a really good offense, talent-wise, they couldn't stack up with Notre Dame's defense. The only team that you could say stacked up well with Notre Dame defensive, like talent-wise, was USC, and USC moved the ball pretty well against Notre Dame. They had almost 400 yards of offense, over 5 yards of play. They didn't rip Notre Dame up, but they moved the ball pretty well on them. And they had some of their own mistakes, and Notre Dame's players made some big plays in some key moments. So that's kind of how I look at it, Trev, and say this defensive staff, it's expected to say you are going to have a top 3 to 4 defense in college football this year. And if you don't, with all due respect, it's going to be considered a disappointment. You can still win a championship with the 6th best defense in college football, 7th or 8th best defense in college football. It just makes it a little bit harder. And so that's the expectations for this group. The talent is there. You had a long stretch of dominant play last season. And now you've got most of your best players coming back. You had one defensive player get drafted off last year's team. One. And it was a 6th-rounder who had a bunch of injuries. Well, there's 2 reasons for that. Number one, some of the guys going pro were not high-level draft picks. We weren't thinking Jared Dawson was going to be a 2nd-round pick and he went undrafted. We were hoping he could get in at the back of round 6 or 7. Same thing with Devontae Smith and Junior Chulamach and all those guys. Why is that? Well, because most of your best players are coming back. With the exception of Josh Burnham, who transferred, all your best players are back. Leonard Moore's back. Drake Bowen's back. Bubakar's back. Bryce Young's back. Christian Gray's back. Adon Schuler's back. Tay Johnson's back. Kingston's back. Jaden Osbury's back. Jalen Sneed back. Like Jason Onye's back. Most of your best players are back. And so that's why I look at it and say that's why expectations are sky high. And it's up to you to figure it out. And no more Purdue's, no more A&M's, no more Miami's where it's like, dude, I have no clue what you're doing. You just got by on talent. It can't be any more of this. Well, he's clearly trying to show everyone how smart he is with these calls. Turn your kids loose and let them go dominate. That's the expectation from start to finish. Indiana did it. What was the game last year where the Indiana defensive staff they got tore up that game? They had a really bad game. Did Indiana last year, Trev, at any point in time, have a game on defense that looked anything like what Notre Dame had against Purdue? The answer is no. They didn't have a single opponent. Not one opponent last year, Trev, got to 300 yards passing in a game last year, right? I mean, nobody got to 400 yards of offense last year. The only game, matter of fact, only 2 teams had over 350 yards against them last year. Michigan State was one, and Oregon in a game that Indiana won 56-22 was the other. And a lot of those 378 yards were after the game was no longer in doubt. Excuse me. Well, Indiana can have that type of performance for 16 straight freaking games, 2 times against Oregon, against Ohio State, Alabama, Miami, but Notre Dame can't do that against Purdue. Okay, I'll give you a pass because it was early in your tenure, but now you're in year 2. Now you've got your hand-picked assistant coaches. No excuses now. It's time to dominate. Can he put it together and do it? That's arguably the biggest question on this entire staff right now.
I would say that that's the biggest question on the entire coaching staff, because let's say that Joe Rudolph and Mike Brown, going back to something that we talked about in the first segment, do answer some of those questions. Mike Brown does put together the proper rotation. Mike Brown does develop all the young talent in the room. Joe Rudolph does prove he's an elite offensive line coach. Does Notre Dame stylistically have the offense to go out and score 40 points a game, including the postseason, for 15 to 16 games if their defense is what it was the first 3 games last year? I don't know the answer to that question, nor do I feel confident enough or comfortable enough to be like, yeah, they can just go do that. Not knowing the adjustments that Mike Denrock made, I'm sure there's a case that could be made as to why, but I don't want to have to be in that spot. I think it's the biggest question on the entire staff. There is 2 main people, 2 main coaches on this entire staff. 3, obviously, if you want to include Marcus Freeman, because he's the driver of the ship. But 2 main assistants that will dictate the overall level of success for Notre Dame. On offense, it's Joe Rudolph, and on defense, it's Chris Ash. It's the biggest thing. And I don't know if there's a close second to those 2. But Chris Ash, his plate is absolutely full going into this season because we just don't know who the real version of him is. Like that's the hardest part. We have 1 season of sample size where it is a night and day difference of who he was as a defensive coordinator. Exactly. That's going to be the hardest part.
I love the fact that I was muted just now and you knew exactly what I said. We've done a lot of shows together because you responded to what I said. You become a very good lip reader.
Thank you.
What I said while muting was it was something that Marcus Freeman forced.
Yep.
We're very confident that was true. You shouldn't need Marcus Freeman to do that now. Marcus Freeman shouldn't have to do that now. And that gets to, that's the point, Trev. I just think it's hilarious that I said that and you were like, exactly, like you knew, because you didn't know what I was saying, but obviously I was muted. So I wanted to make sure that they understood what I was saying. But that's the thing is you shouldn't need Marcus Freeman to step in after 3 games and say, hey, it wasn't even the results, it was the why.
Yep.
I remember talking to somebody after the Boise game. That was the first game they really ramped up the pressure. And I was talking to a dad of a player, and I'm like, hey, that was great to see. And he goes, yeah. Talked to my son afterwards, and he was like, they were like, it's about time. We've had that in the game plan for 3 weeks, but we just never turned to it enough. And so it's like, it shouldn't take that. Now, you know the players better. You know their strengths. You know their weaknesses. Play to their strengths. I understand to a degree last year some of the struggles. You didn't know what you had. Devontae Smith was injured. Well, all these different excuses. Okay, well, those are gone. So let's all accept those excuses as to why, hey, he had some guys hurt. He didn't know the players well. He was still learning, all those things. Okay, cool. That explains the first 3 games last year. No more of those excuses this year. It's time to go do it. That's where it's at. And it's on him. It's on him. So I think your point is correct. There's 2 coaches whose success this season is going to determine, assistant coaches whose success is going to determine if this team can win a title. Joe Rudolph on offense and Chris Ash on defense. And I don't know how that's overly arguable. Now it's time to go earn it and shut all the people like me up for the criticism we've thrown at you. Seriously, I'd love to be proven wrong about Chris Ash. Would love it, because if I am proven wrong about Chris Ash, Notre Dame's going to win a title. Because there's nobody that questions the talent of this team.
No, from top to bottom on their defensive roster, nobody touches it from top to bottom. I'm with you. Some of the onus is also going to be on Marcus Freeman to make sure that he stays on track. You brought something up earlier in the part 1 of today's show about how his fault is putting too much trust and faith into his head coaches. When he sat down with the bus and with the boys and talked about what is, something that you would do anything for, Freeman said a national title. Little corny, maybe, but do I believe him? 100%. One of the things that falls into the category of doing anything for a national title is making sure your defensive coordinator stays on track and coaches and game plans and implements and calls the correct things that fit the skill set of your roster. And if you want to ask how that's done, you ask Mike Denrock, because that's something that he's done in back-to-back seasons in South Bend. Mm-hmm. And that's what absolutely has to be done. But I could spend an hour talking solely just about Chris Ash and some of the things that I would like to see for him to do this upcoming season. But let's be real about something. It's not just him.
Right.
There are new coaches on this staff that are stepping into very big shoes that also are going to be challenged this season. Now, this is a different... I don't want to paint this picture that Aaron Henry has to answer the question in 4.5 months if he's just as good or better than Mike Mickens. I don't want to have to paint that picture because I just don't think that that's a realistic standard. You know what I mean?
And it doesn't matter. Joe Rudolph doesn't have to be the next Harry Hiestand. He just has to be the best version of himself. I don't need Chris Ash to be Al Golden. I don't want him to be Al Golden because I kind of like having a great run defense. And that's clearly something that matters to Chris Ash. And it didn't matter to Al Golden. Al Golden flat out said that. I don't care about having the number one rush defense in college football. If you were to ask, I'd be one to bet you, if you could ask Chris Ash, now he may not say this publicly, and he shouldn't say this publicly, but if you could have an off-the-record conversation with Chris Ash, and you could say, Coach, you're going to rank number one in the country in one stat tat category this year, just one. I think he'd give one of two answers. One is obvious. All D coordinators would probably say this: turnovers. I'm going to lead the nation in forced turnovers. And if that wasn't his answer, I'd be willing to bet you that Chris Ash would say, I want to have the number one run defense in college football this year. I'd be willing to bet you $1,000. Now, actually, I won't bet that because then Chris Ash will just collude with you to give a different answer, and then I owe you $1,000, and then you guys split it two ways. But I'd be willing to bet you, Trev, that if you could get Chris Ash in a off the – because coaches are not – I mean, they're going to give you the coach answers. He would say, hey, listen, if I can rank number one in one category, it's run defense. Because then number one run defense then impacts so much. You're in more third and longs, which means more sacks, which means more turnovers, which means better third down. A dominant run defense means so much to so many others. If you were to ask Al Golden that wouldn't be in his top 10 of answers of where he wants to rank number one. How do I know that? Because he literally said that in an interview. I don't care about having the number one ranked defense and run defense in college football. I kind of like that about Chris Ash. I think in college football that matters. I understand why Al Golden doesn't feel that way. Because for the last decade, he had 4 years of not coaching in the NFL. That was the 3 years of Notre Dame. The rest of his career is in the NFL. So I think that's obviously a big part of who Chris Ash wants to be. So again, I'm not asking to be Al Golden. What I'm asking you to do is to have your number one priority be, how can I get the most out of my players? Not how can I show everyone how smart I am, but how good my players are. That's what I want from him. That's who I want the Chris Ash to be. Not, hey, I want you to run the defense the way that Marcus Freeman would run the defense. Nope, don't want that. Neither does Marcus Freeman. He just wants him to say, hey, here's our philosophy. I need you to live within that philosophy of being aggressive, attacking, and things like that. And I think that's the thing is, who's the real Chris Ash? That's what we're going to find out. To your point, Trev. But I want you to be the best version of yourself, as long as yourself is someone who is player driven. The way do you think Mike Denrock wanted to have an offense where his quarterback rushed for almost 1,000 yards as on design run? No, I don't think that's what he wanted his offense to be. But that's what he had to do in 2024 because was what fit his players the best.
Absolutely.
And that's what great coaches do. And you drew that comparison earlier, and that's what I want to see Chris Ash do. What can I do to get the most out of my players? And if he can do that, then I think this defense is going to be special. And he's going to get a lot of credit for that because he's a smart football coach. But sometimes smart football coaches get themselves in trouble by trying to show everyone how smart they are
100%.
And not, hey, this is what my guys do well. Let's go. That's the key. And then let's transition to the other point too, Trev, is he's then also has to, what we talked about Denrock, you have to steer the assistant coaches to get them on the same page of, hey, if we're going to be this, I need you, Charlie Partridge, I need you, Brian Jean Murray, I need you, Aaron Henry, to do this. I need you, Andy Baugh, I need you, Marty Biaggi, I need you, Trey Reader, I need you, Nick Sebastian, I need you, Javon Codlin, all the people that are part of this. I need us all going in the same direction. I think there's a better chance of that happening this year because he walked into a situation last year where he was the new guy. And they had a way of doing things. It was like, well, hold on. When we did this last year, when we went to play for the title, we didn't do it that way. I understand that. That's human nature. This guy's going to come in and change everything that we've done that worked so well to build this elite defense the last couple of years. This guy wants to come and change it all. That's going to create some friction. Well, now he's the vet in the room, and they're all got to come in and adapt to his way. So it's now imperative that he gets everybody going in the same direction. And I think Marcus Freeman is who hired the coaches. But it's not a coincidence that all three hires have two of the three hires have some connection to Chris Ash. I don't think that's a coincidence. They're great coaches, but they also are tied with Chris Ash. And, of course, it starts up front with Charlie Partridge.
Yeah, without a doubt. For Charlie Partridge, it's going to be what level can you get this defensive line to? I think Al Washington did a phenomenal job getting this group from like a top 25 unit to a top 10 unit. Now it's up to Charlie Partridge to build on the foundation that Al Washington laid and get them from a top 5 unit to or top 10 unit to a top 5 or top 3 unit. That's going to be the biggest task at hand. There are some things that we saw over the spring that leave me very, very, very confident that he's going to be able to do those things. He's a very hands-on coach. He's a very intentional coach. He's a very intense coach in a good way. It's not a MF and you grabbing your face mask telling you that you suck.
Intense from a passion standpoint. He's passionate about teaching.
Yes.
That's the best way I could say what you just said, Travis. Best way I could say it. He is an intense guy because he's passionate about teaching and kids learning and getting the most out of them. I was impressed with what I saw. And again, we're people that have defended the job Al Washington did the last couple of years. I don't think he gets enough credit for the job he did. Now it's up to Charlie Partridge to take it to that next level. And so far, so good. Been very impressed with what we've seen from him, Trevor. And that's partly why you got hired him, is because he is someone who has a reputation for developing the technical part of the game and the mental part of the game to an elite level, because he's been at Pitt in Wisconsin. He's not getting a bunch of Rodney Dunhams and Ebenezer Tades and Boubacar Traore's out of high school, highly ranked guys. He takes a bunch of 3-star kids with a lot of God-given talent, but they got to be molded more than a Rodney Dunham who shows up the first day of fall camp or spring practice and you're like, dude, this guy's ready to play right now. Now it's my job to get him here, and here. And that's part of the thing that you look at. That's why he's developed the way he has. And he's had to be a great technician and teaching the mental part of the game and the technical part of the game, because he doesn't have a Boubacar that he can just put on the field and just say, dude, that guy's a freak. He's got to teach him how to play the game. And then he gets the most out of the talented players that he has. But I think that matches very well because Notre Dame has a lot of raw talent on this roster that they need someone to kind of enhance that second level. You know, Al Washington did a great job of teaching the basics and the foundation. Now it's time to maybe get into some of those master's level classes with D-line technique. And those are some of the things that I was most impressed by this spring, Trevor, is he's really good at teaching those things, that using your hands to win, using your release to set up a counter move, things like that, where last year's D-line was just great at just coming off and winning around the edge and just using they didn't have a lot of counter moves. They could just beat the guys across from them. And I think Charlie Partridge has shown that he's got the ability to kind of do that. And if you can have guys that are good enough to just win with basic moves and then you teach them counters, good luck stopping that.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Another new coaching or a new member of the defensive coaching staff is Brian Jean-Marie. I would argue that in terms of the defensive coaching staff, I think he has the second hardest job behind Chris Ash in what he's stepping into. He's walking into a room that lost Max Bulla and then was given Al Washington and then lost Al Washington, and now he's stepping in for basically 2 linebacker coaches technically in the span of one offseason. You had to rebuild the recruiting board, and Notre Dame is kind of picking up some pieces on the recruiting trail with where that is concerned. And then he's also, this spring, in his first time being hands-on with his unit, didn't have Drake Bowen, didn't have Kingston Viliamasa, didn't have Kahanu Kia, had Madden Faramo in limited capacity, and his number 1 Mike linebacker played Will the last 2 years on Notre Dame's defense. The job that he's walking into has been extremely difficult, but I loved a lot of the things that he's done so far this offseason. He's found different ways, talked about it in interviews, of how to keep guys like Bowen and Viliamasa engaged, even though they're not strapping on the pads and out there with the first team defense. Jaden Ausberry looked like he had a very natural transition from Will to Mike and running it with the first team. I've gone on record to say that if I just started watching Notre Dame football on like March 19th of this year, I would have thought Ford was their returning middle linebacker. You have to be able to give Brian Jean-Marie that credit. Also, credit goes to Jaden Ausberry.
He won't get much.
Exactly.
That's the that's the tough part for him, because he's walking into a group that is so established.
Mm-hmm.
It's like your job is not to screw it up. But, and we can't say for sure that we've seen him do things to improve certain players, because we haven't seen him with Drake and Kingston. But, I mean, like you said, we saw Jaden Ausberry make a very smooth transition to Mike this year. I mean, how do you not give the guy that's running the room now that credit? We saw Teddy Rizak improve. We saw Ko'okia improve. But no matter what the linebackers do, it's going to be tough to give him a lot of credit for it. Or I don't know that he'll get a lot of credit for it, because, again, they've already been pretty good. But he's another guy that I've been impressed with what he's been able to do this year. The question I have for Brian Jean-Marie and Charlie Partridge is, I think their technical coaching is outstanding from what we've seen so far. Some of the things I've heard from sources off the field about the way that Brian Jean-Marie came in and started building relationships was also very good. It was not about, well, I know that Bullen did this, but we're going to do it my way. It just was coming in like, hey, you guys are great players, and my job is to make you better, and this is how I'm going to do it. And, you know, like he had a plan for how, Drake, here's how I'm going to get you better. Jaden, here's how I'm going to get you better. And appreciating the job that was already done, as opposed to acting like I got to reinvent the wheel just to show that I'm this guy. Didn't hear any of that. How much he's worked with them on the mental approach and just body positioning and just little things like that, I think has been great so far. And he has been able to do those things with Drake and Kingston. The mental work he has been able to do with them. We just haven't seen the things where it's going to manifest to our eyeballs. But what I've heard behind the scenes is very good. Here's my question for them. How much leeway do they get with Chris Ash to influence how they go about attacking teams? Will they be able to kind of serve as not counterweights, because I don't look at it that way. You can't have a position coach that are always at odds with the defensive coordinator, but will they be able to have some influence and say, hey, coach, man, this is what we got. Like, let's turn these kids loose. And then does Chris Ash trust them enough to say, okay, cool, let's do that. I may want to, you know, be a heavy sim pressure guy, but we're going to actually bring a lot of pressure, or we're going to bring pressure this way, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, because I trust my coaches to know their rooms. That's something that dynamic is going to be very interesting. And the same thing goes for Aaron Henry. Aaron Henry's in a similar boat as Brian Jean-Marie, that if the secondary is great this year, how much credit is he going to get? Fair or not? It's like, well, yeah, you walked into a pretty good situation. You inherited arguably the best secondary in college football, and your job was to not screw it up. But even within that, I love the approach he's taken to building on to what Mike Mickens already established. He didn't come to, screw Mike Mickens, we're going to do it my way. It's like, look, you guys got pretty coached pretty well. It's my job to take it to the next level. And I think that's allowed for very smooth transitions with all three of those coaches. But same thing with Aaron Henry is how much will he be able to have his say in how they do things, and how well will the four work together? Because even though a lot of them have it in relationships with each other, it's not a lot of relationships at the same time. And even when there was, like, there's a lot of changes. So how much room will Chris Ash give the assistant coaches to say, hey, I need your DNA to be on this as well? Like Mike Denrock does a lot with Joe Rudolph when it comes to the run game, like he does with Gino Guidugli in the pass game, and like he does with Mike Brown in certain things. Like, hey, I'm trusting you guys to do this and have this say and to be this, and I need you to be able to tell me, be honest about this. And you know, how will Chris Ash allow them to speak their things into existence in that room is going to tell us a lot about how this group works together, Trev. And then, of course, getting your players to play at a high level. But that's the thing I'm most fascinated by. After watching these players, these coaches this spring and their track records, I have no doubt that this is going to be a very fundamentally sound football team.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a huge, important step towards when you've got dudes, as long as they know where to be and how to line up, you're going to have a great defense. I don't think we're going to see any Purdue's this year. I don't think we're going to see any Texas A&M's in the regular season. None. I'm more concerned about, well, we see them in the playoffs. You're just going to be able to out-talent, you know, defensively, you're going to be able to out-talent everybody you play except for one team, and that's Miami. You're going to be able to out-talent, I mean, you're going to out-talent BYU. You just don't screw it up. You're going to out-talent them. Just the same way you out-talented USC last year, same way you out-talented, you know, Arkansas, who had a lot of NFL players on their roster last year. You embarrassed them. You know, I don't see that happening this year, but can your defense dominate the way and make the big clutch plays the way we saw Ohio State's defense do in 24, Michigan's defense do in 23, and Indiana's defense do last year? Those are the big questions in the postseason. I fully expect Notre Dame to be a top 5 defense in the regular season. I have no doubt.
Oh,
we're not going to see Purdue. We're not going to see Purdue games. We're not going to see Texas A&M games in 11 of the 12 games, just because they're going to out-talent everybody they're going to play. And they're going to, and how you out-talent on defense, it's because your guys know where to be and they know how to do their job. And you can overcome, okay, they're not as aggressive as they should be when your talent is that. You know, going from Carson Hobbs against Texas A&M to Christian Gray is going to be light years different than what it was last year. Things like that.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, FanDuel also thinks the same. They have Notre Dame right now as 19.5-point favorites over Wisconsin. And I don't think that's because they think the final score is going to be 50-30.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you completely. With Aaron Henry, I think he's going to be able to make his money just by what happens at field and nickel. Mm-hmm. Respectfully, there's nothing that Leonard Moore is going to do this year where I'm going to be like, man, shout out to Aaron Henry. There's nothing that a Don Schuler is going to do this year outside of like smaller, like decreasing the amount of missed tackles, things like that. There's nothing that really the safety tandem in general, you could argue definitely more for Tay Johnson.
For Tay, for sure. Just the consistency of doing your job like we talked about when we did our state of the program on safeties is Tay, it's about consistency and being in the right place and things like that, that we would have had confidence Mike Mickens would have been able to get him to do in year 2. Now it's up to Aaron Henry to do that. But yeah, to your point, if Don Schuler has an All-American year, we're like, well, duh. If Leonard Moore's the best cornerback in college football, well, duh.
Yeah.
Safety tandem just does what they did last year, Trev, even without the improvement. It's still one of the best safety tandems in college football.
100%.
To your point, it's a great point. It's the nickel and field, how well he can get them going. It's a great point.
Yep. Nickel and field will be where he's going to make his money this season for Notre Dame. That is the one area where I think fans could be like, you know what? That's the improvement.
If Christian Gray becomes a consistently dominant football player, he'll get a lot of credit for that. Rightfully so. Same thing for DJ McKinney. And then, of course, after that, it's if any of the young players step up and have great years, he deserves a lot of credit for that as well. If Dallas Golden has a breakout year, if Mark Zachary, Jaden Sanders, somebody like that, one of the freshmen, and he'll get a lot of credit for that. That's where I think he has a chance to get a lot more credit than Aaron Henry does, or Brian John Marie does. Because it's like, what could you that the average fan can look at? What could you possibly do to make that be better than it was? There's things that I think we'll be able to point out during the year, like, hey, guys, this is where they got better. But they were already showing that in the second half of last year. And so that's why I said I don't know how much credit he's going to get, but I do think there are areas where if this guy, or this guy steps up in the secondary, then I think Aaron Henry will get a lot of credit. We are also not saying that they don't deserve credit. We absolutely think that they do, but it's just like when you walk into a pretty good room already, it's like, don't act like you reinvent the wheel. And that's something that kind of bothered me about Jaywan Sider last year. I felt like he was trying to act like he created something and they're only good because of him, instead of like, hey, man, I walked into a pretty good situation. My job is to get the most out of my players. They're always seem like this little kind of attempt to take these little petty shots at the job Dylan McCullough did. And I didn't appreciate that, because Dylan McCullough did a phenomenal job getting that room ready. And then you did a phenomenal job of taking them to the next level. Why can't we give everybody credit for that? One thing I love about what this defensive staff has done is they've done exactly what we thought Coach Sider should have done last year, which is, dude, you're a great coach. You're replacing a great coach. There's no need to tear down the guy you're replacing to give yourself love. It's like, hey, look, here's where they are, and we appreciate the job they've done, and now it's my job to take them to the next level and then focus on that without having to try to convince everybody that your job is tougher than it actually is. And I didn't appreciate that, and I'm glad that this defensive staff didn't do that. But the reality is by doing that, they're going to take away some of the credit they're going to get. But at the end of the day, if they dominate this year, they'll get their credit. It just won't be, wow, did you see how they revitalized the program the way that, like, Bryant Haynes is going to get credit for doing it in Indiana?
Right.
And that's okay. So what? Who cares if you're hoisting the trophy at the end of the year? Who cares? And that's what I hope that they all understand. And from the conversations I've had with people around the program, I think that's what their focus is. I don't think Aaron Henry came here to get credit and love. I don't think Brian John Marie came here to get credit and love. I don't think Charlie Parks came here to get credit and love. I think they came here to help develop young men at a place that they feel they can do that at and to win a championship. That's what I think they all came here for. So I think they're all going in the right direction.
Brian, to take us home here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we have a daily mailbag to take us home the rest of the way. Now, if this does happen to be your first mailbag, you can put MB for mailbag or a mailbox emoji prior to your submission. Lets us know to set that question aside. Super chats do get bumped up to the top. Theme for today, obviously, we talked a lot about Notre Dame coaches. So if you want to ask about Notre Dame coaches, college football coaches, those questions will take precedent. But if you got some other questions, you can go ahead and throw those in there too.
We do have a couple of Super chats, Trev, to get us started.
From Anthony Solomon, appreciate you, man. Great show, gentlemen. Freeman will either win a championship at Notre Dame or put his successor in a position to do so, unlike his predecessor.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you could argue that, Marcus Freeman walked into a good program, and I think that's absolutely true. But Marcus Freeman also had to overcome some bad DNA that was implemented by a previous successor. Excuse making had to get kicked out. Why we can't do this, why we can't do that. Roster shortcomings. I've argued before. You go look at the roster that Charlie Weiss or Brian Kelly inherited from Charlie Weiss, and I'll go to toe-to-toe with anybody and argue that it was better than the one that Marcus Freeman inherited from Brian Kelly. I'll take that, and I'll argue with you on that all day. How many college and future NFL Hall of Famers did Marcus Freeman inherit? Not recruit in year 1 or 2, but inherit. Greatest receiver in Notre Dame history, production-wise, he inherited. Mackey Award-winning tight end, he inherited. 4-year starting left tackle, future NFL Hall of Famer, he inherited. Elite first-round draft pick at safety that is also likely going to be a Hall of Famer, he inherited. Greatest linebacker in program history from a recognition,
impact,
all of that, he inherited.
Michael Floyd.
Yeah, that's why I said all-time leading pass catcher at the beginning, most productive all-time receiver. And I'm referring to Manti on that last one. He inherited all of that. Who are those comparable guys that Marcus Freeman inherited? I don't think that they were there. Maybe Joe Alt. It was a different deal. So I agree with your sentiment. I do. Hopefully, though, he's the one that wins that championship.
Agreed.
That would be much better for our lives, all of our lives.
Man. Super chat from ND since 93. Appreciate you. Does a national championship make Freeman the number 1 coach in football? Also, do you think he stays if they win one?
The last part, I don't have any idea. There's 2 ways that I could look at it and say, well, if he wins one, he'll be like, what else do I have to accomplish in Notre Dame? And so he wants a new challenge. Certainly could see that. The other thing he could look at and say, I won one, I won another. I want to go down as one of the greats of all time at Notre Dame. And in order to do that, with all due respect, you've got to win more than one. We all love Lou Holtz, but I don't know a lot of people that argue Notre Dame fans that love Lou Holtz argue for his greatness. They don't say, well, he was better than Rockne, or he was better than Leahy, or he was better than Parsegian. I don't know him do that. Why? Because those guys won more than Coach Holtz did, and Coach Holtz was great. But it's about you want to be an all-time great. You want to get a statue, win one. You want to be considered, you want to get on the same level as other guys, win more. That could be it. Okay, new challenges to do it again and do it differently or whatever. I have no idea how he's going to respond to that. I really don't know. I don't have a clue. Does it make him the number 1 coach in college football? Part of that depends on how they get there. If they have a regular season like Ohio State had 2 years ago and they sneak into the playoffs because there's a lot of bad teams and then they get hot, I don't think that makes you the number 1 coach. And my personal opinion, I'm sharing my opinion. But if they get in the way that I think they're going to get in and, play the way that, then sure, I think that does. Because I think he's top 5 or 6 already. And, he'll have, had to beat some pretty good coaches most likely on his way to a championship this year. He's already got some big wins over top coaches already, except for one. There's been one kryptonite for Marcus Freeman so far. But I think I'll say this, if Notre Dame wins a title this year and they beat Ohio State along the way, I don't think there's any doubt that he'll be considered the number 1 coach. Because that's the one thing he hasn't done yet, aside from winning it all, is beaten. He's beat Kirby. He's beaten the brakes off of Dabo. Dabo got him, but they blasted Dabo. He blew out Kurt Cignetti. Let's be real. That was 27-3 when Notre Dame called off the Dogs. That was a beatdown. Who's the one big-time coach he hasn't beat yet that he's actually coached against? It's Ryan Day. It's 0-3. That's it. Never coached against Sark. He hasn't coached against Kalen DeBoer. He hasn't coached against Dan Lanning. I'm just talking about he's 1-0 against Kirby. It's 1-0 against Kurt Cignetti. He's 1-1 against Dabo. And their win over Clemson was a lot more impressive than the one that Clemson gave the next year. You know what I mean? So Yeah, that would cement it, but I would lean towards yes regardless because he's already considered right there. I mean, his rise to number one would require less distance from where he's currently ranked to number one than what it does for Kurt Signetti, who some consider the best coach. So yeah, I would say so, Trev. What say you?
Yeah, I think it would absolutely be within the discussion. To your point, it just kind of depends on how they win it. I mean, if they beat Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas and receive a bye on their way to winning a national championship, then yeah, I don't think that there's any question in my mind that he would be the number one coach in college football going into the 27 season.
Mm-hmm.
But, if they don't get a bye and they play like Tulane in the first round and then they beat Texas Tech in the quarterfinals because they somehow won the Big 12 and then they beat like Georgia in the semis, and we've already seen them beat Kirby, and then they beat Texas along the way. They don't play Ohio State. The wins look that convincing. He gets vaulted into the top three or four. I mean, him winning a title already puts him ahead of Lanning, Sark, and DeBoer.
Sure.
And that's just not.
I think the only question there would be, do you put him ahead of Day and Kirby?
Yeah, 100%.
If they win it this year, there's nobody on the planet that has any ounce of integrity that's going to rank Dan Lanning or Steve Sarkisian ahead of him.
Nah.
None. Like, I think the only scenario where you can even fathom it is, let's say they lose 6 starters from the week before and Notre Dame barely beats them. Like, man, what a great coaching. Maybe something like that, but nope. Yeah, agree.
From Michael Parks, what would Newt Rockne think of Marcus Freeman?
I have no idea. I don't. I don't. Newt Rockne passed away in 1930. That was almost 100 years ago. I don't have a clue. All I can say is the only thing of Newt Rockne and Marcus Freeman I care about is that Marcus Freeman is attempting to live up to the standard that was created under Newt Rockne. The championships, the history, the tradition will play anybody, anywhere, anytime, coast to coast, all that kind of stuff. That was created by Newt Rockne, and every coach has been held to that standard. And some have lived up to it. Frank Leahy, Eric Parsegian, to a degree, Coach Holtz. That standard will never change, and that's the only thing that I look at. I don't know what Newt Rockne would think of Marcus Freeman. I mean, if you want to think about it, his heyday was in the 1920s. Life was a little bit different in the 1920s for everyone than it is in the 2020s. I don't have a clue what he thinks of him, and I don't really care. I don't care what he thinks of what he would think of Marcus Freeman. I care that Marcus Freeman lives up to the standard of excellence that Newt Rockne created, and that's all I care about. But yeah, this is a national coaching question, Trevor, from James Delaney. He asks, how long do you think Mike Locksley has at Maryland?
It's kind of a cop-out answer, but it kind of just depends on what they do this year. I mean, they have talent at certain positions. I mean, Malik Washington is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the entire country, but it's not like his tenure so far at Maryland has been that great. I mean, in 2019, he went 3-9. In 2020, he went 2-3. Stacked together some decent runs from 21 to 23, went 7-6, and then back to 5-8-5 seasons. And now he's put together back-to-back 4-8 seasons. So I think his future with Maryland is going to be dictated this year. I mean, if they're coming and getting blown out and it's not even competitive games with a talented quarterback like Malik Washington, I don't know if he finishes the season, because there's been programs in the Big Ten that have had a habit recently of firing coaches in the middle of the season and then throwing their hands up in the air wondering what the heck happened. But if he gets him back to bowl eligible this year and breaks that 4-8 streak, I think it buys him another year. That's how I view it.
I agree, Trev. It's all going to be determined by this season. And unfortunately for Maryland, I don't think their schedule is super conducive to a huge season. I don't expect them to be like an 8-9 win season. I don't think that's the case, but you got to start winning the games you're supposed to win, right? I mean, you've got Hampton at home. You got to win that. At UConn, I'm sorry, you got to win that. Virginia Tech at home, UCLA at home, you got to win those. Rutgers at home, you got to win that. And then between Wisconsin and Illinois, you got to win one of those. And then can you pull off some perceived upset at Nebraska, home against Penn State? Things like, you got to get them to a bowl game. You got at Purdue. So, I don't think when you've got at Ohio State, you got to play at USC. You've got Penn State at home. You've got Illinois, Virginia Tech. There's some good teams in your schedule to where I don't think they're going to have like a 9-10 kind of Indiana 2024 bounce back. But when you also have a schedule that has Hampton, UConn, Virginia Tech, UCLA, Nebraska, Rutgers, Illinois, Purdue, Wisconsin, Penn State, I do expect you to make it to a bowl game and to show growth and progress and avoid the bad blowouts to teams that should. You get blown out at Ohio State, dude. It is what it is. You get beat convincingly at USC. It is what it is. I don't see any other blowouts. I don't want you to get blown out at home by Illinois or Virginia Tech or a team like that. So I think there's a lot of pressure on them. But I think getting off to a fast start in September is really the key for them. You've got to hold serve at home. That means beating Hampton, beating Virginia Tech, and beating UCLA, and then going on the road. And if you can beat UConn, you start the season 4-0. You've got some good wins over coaches at new places. So I think that, and then just hold your water at home the rest of the year. Beat Rutgers, beat Penn State, and then beat one of Illinois or Wisconsin. Boom, right there, Trev. That's 7 wins right there. And then if you lose to a Virginia Tech or a UCLA, can't lose to both, then you've got to beat both Wisconsin and Illinois at home or Penn State. That's the kind of thing. So there's a chance for him to have a really good season where they're winning games, they're competitive in some of their losses, they're going to a bowl game, and you've got this great quarterback coming back next year, which helps you go into the portal and say, hey, we're going to offer you a decent amount, but man, don't you want to come play with Malik? And so I think that's, but if they start off like 2-2, he's going to be.
One of the benefits though for Mike Locksley and Maryland as a whole is like their expectations are super, 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 super low coming into this season. FanDuel has their over under win total at 4.5, and they're tied dead last in odds to win the Big Ten this year. Not that even if they have a turnaround, they would compete for it, but they're tied dead last with Maryland, Northwestern, Purdue, Rutgers, and Michigan State.
But there's no reason they can't have a winning record in their conference this year, Trev.
None. Exactly.
None. And that's the expectation. That's what I want to see. I'll just say this real quick. The one thing they have going for them is getting Malik Washington to stay was huge. I'm telling you, Trev, that kid is going to be, if you coach him right, that kid has a chance to be special. That's the kind of kid that can completely change around a program if you use him right. He has that kind of ability.
100%.
You take him off that roster and put just about any other quarterback outside of C.J. Carr, Arch Manning, Dante Moore, I don't have the optimism about them being a bowl team this year that I do.
Agreed.
Big part of that, you need to beat that team is because, dude, you got Malik Washington. You're going to have the best quarterback on the field a lot of weeks. I mean, look, do you Hampton? This is weeks where we think they have the best quarterback on the field. Hampton, yeah. UConn, yeah. Virginia Tech. I think Malik Washington's better than Ethan Grunkemeyer. With all due respect to Ethan Grunkemeyer, who you and I are both high on. Who do you think is the more talented quarterback in that game, Trev?
I mean, talented Malik Washington.
Yeah, there you go. UCLA, Nico. I'd take Malik Washington over Nico any day of the week. What say you?
Yeah, it's same.
Nebraska, Anthony Calandria.
Malik Washington 8 days of the week.
Julian Sand. You could argue he's more talented than Julian Sand, but Julian Sand's right now the better quarterback. That's not debatable. Rutgers. Who is Rutgers quarterback this year going to be? I know they got a transfer guy.
I'm not sure.
I don't even know who Rutgers quarterback is supposed to be. I think I don't want to say that says a lot about the quarterback because that could just be an us problem, but I'm drawing a blank on who their quarterback's going to be. AJ Srirachi, Dylan Lonergan. Okay, I'll take Malik Washington. Illinois, didn't they get Caton Hauser? Didn't they get him to transfer?
Yes.
I'll take Malik Washington. Purdue, Ryan Brown. You and I both like Ryan Brown. I'll take Malik Washington. Wisconsin, this is a little bit more debatable because I think neither of us debate that Malik Washington is certainly more talented than the kid that they got, the ODU transfer.
Colton Joseph.
Right, Colton Joseph. We both, no doubt, but Colton Joseph has a lot more, he's got some experience and he's got some talent as well. So okay, that one's close. USC, Jade Maeva, if you want to give, again, I think Malik's more talented. Jade Maeva's far more experienced and proven quarterback. And then you look at Penn State, Rocco Becht. That's another one that's close. Malik's obviously more talented, but Rocco has lots of experience. He's played on the big stage. So you're going to have a lot of weeks where you have the best quarterback on the field, a lot of weeks. And the weeks where you don't, it's a lack of experience thing that what we're looking to. It ain't about talent. So that's a big reason for my optimism for that team. big reason.
From Salty, Dabo Swinney has responded to the loss of key coaching personnel, ergo Brent Venables, by promoting coaches from within his program. Should he have hired external coaches instead?
Oh, sure. And he actually has promoted every single time. Now, he ended up going outside to hire Garrett Riley, but that was after the failed Brandon Streeter experiment of 2020. Was that 23, 22? So, yeah. But even when he went outside to get hires, Trev, he didn't make good ones. Garrett Riley was not a good hire. Now, I don't think Dabo really helped Garrett Riley much by trying to force Garrett Riley to run the Clemson offense, but it wasn't a good hire. So he went out and got Tom Allen this past year, and it didn't work out. Now, I think that's going to work out a lot better this year, but we'll see. You know, Tom Allen used to be a really good defensive coordinator, but he's been a head coach for a long time. He walked into a pretty good situation at Penn State, you know, in his 1 year there. Can he rectify that problem this year at Clemson and get them back on track? We're going to find out. But I think it's one of Dabo's problems. He's way too loyal. And I guess if you're going to have a criticism of someone, that's one that I wouldn't mind as much. But the reality is you got to know when you're putting the people that you're loyal to in a bad position. It's not always the right thing to do to promote someone that you want to give a shot that's just not ready or not good enough. And you've got to know that. You've got to know those things, right? And that's what good coaches have to do. Marcus Freeman made a very tough decision, but he felt it was the right decision by not promoting Mike Mickens to D coordinator, knowing it might cost him having Mike Mickens. But he said he felt that they needed to go a different direction. That's not easy to do, Trev. And unfortunately, Dabo has not made those right decisions, and he's put people in position. And I would say Wes Goodwin had nowhere near the qualifications that Mike Mickens had. Same with Brandon Streeter. But, yeah, I think that's hurt him. But even when he's gone outside, those haven't worked yet either. Now we'll see if this year they do. And he's technically going outside the program this year, but it's to bring back an oldie but a goodie, you know, in Chad Morris, which we'll see if that works or not. We'll find out. But, yeah, he hasn't – that's been the NIL and transfer portal. Those you can say whatever you want about, oh, that's the reason they're not winning. Clemson did not go 7-6 last year because they didn't embrace the transfer portal. They went 7-6 last year because they did a terrible job building that team and running that team and calling that team. They had, 9 guys drafted this year, Trev? 9, including multiple first and second round picks. They didn't have a talent problem because he avoids the portal. They had a coaching problem last year and a culture problem, and culture gets established from a coaching standpoint. I don't want to hear anybody, Clemson struggles, haven't embraced the portal. Bull pucky. Because that was there was a reason everybody had them in the top 5 last year. There's a reason they had 9 guys drafted in the NFL draft, and it wasn't a bunch of 6th and 7th round draft picks, Trev. I mean, let's just go look at it. Here's what Clemson had this year. They had 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a third-round pick, 2 fourth-round picks, and 2 fifth-round picks. So of their 9 picks, all of them were taken in the 5th round or higher. The lowest draft pick they had was Adam Randall at number 174. Had 3 defensive linemen taken. And 1 in the first round, 1 in the second round, 1 in the 5th round. And they got Will Helt coming back. So I don't want to hear, they're not winning because Portland NIL, because that team they had last year flat out had no business talent-wise losing less than 10 games. Look who they lost to. They lost to a bunch of mediocre teams. It's not like, they lost because they didn't have the talent to beat Syracuse at home. What? You know what I mean? Like, they didn't have the talent to beat Duke. They didn't have the talent to beat Georgia Tech or SMU. They lost at home by 11 to SMU. They didn't have the talent to beat Penn State at the end of the year. Come on. It was coaching. This year, talent maybe talent is more of an issue. We'll see. But him putting it together a bad coaching staff and not building the culture the right way is why they went 7-6 last year. Not because of the portal, not because of NIL. It was that. Well, they should have gone to the portal. They signed a 5-star running back. Maybe they should have coached that kid up. You know what I mean? You couldn't have got Gideon Davidson more ready. No, it's because your offensive line and your veteran offensive line played poorly. So, I don't care about internal, external. Hire better coaches, period. Whether they're promotions or not, hire better coaches. That's been Dabo's biggest flaw. He went 10 years of basically having the same coaches. You had Chad Morris and then Chad Morris's understudies that replaced him. And then you had Brent Venables for a decade. And he didn't have to turn over a lot of coaches. He had the same O-line coach for a long time. And he won with those guys. But since he's had to start replacing a lot of those coaches, he has not done a good job. And that, more than the NIL and the portal, has been their biggest problem. All right, let's get down to some more here. Here we go.
From Jay Melvin, Brian, do you think this defense will look a lot like the 2018 Notre Dame defense with the scheme and players, especially on D-line?
Possibly. I hope so. To a degree, I think this team has even more talent than that defense did, which is saying a lot because that defense had a lot of NFL players on it. But certainly have more depth than that 2018 defense. But like that was a heavy zone-oriented defense. Like you've never heard me say, man, Clark Lee could have really been something if he would have been more willing to play more man. Man, he screwed up by not playing man all the time. That's what keeps saying. This isn't about man versus zone. This is about playing to the strengths of your players and being aggressive, letting them fly the ball. My one complaint with Clark Lee at times was it's a little bit too much bend but don't break. I would like to see them be a little bit more aggressive. You never heard me say, man, they should have played more man. Because I remember them trying to play man in the opener, and I watched Nico Collins run by Julian Love on a post route, smoke him, and they're like, yeah, we're going to do that anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and they let Troy play a little bit more man than Julian, but it has a chance to be. You had a great linebacking core that year. Drew Tranquil and Tavon Coney had a really good D-line that year. A bunch of NFL players up front. You had a great starting secondary. The difference between this team and that team is this team has way better depth.
Yeah.
Way better depth.
Yep. I think they have better depth. I think they're bigger across the board.
Agree.
Yeah.
But if they play like the 2018 defense, Trev, this will be a championship caliber football team. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, without a doubt.
They did not win a title in 2018 because of their defense. Hard to win when you score 3 points in the semifinals.
Yeah.
I mean, they kept Clemson down for as long as they could. And eventually just couldn't keep them down anymore.
Yeah, they didn't win a championship because of the guy driving the boat.
Right. Yes. Ooh, yes. All right.
From Battle in the Trenches, what are your biggest question marks heading into the season for the new coaches?
So with Charlie Partridge, it's going to be about how does he develop the depth at end? That's my biggest question mark. And it's not about him. It's about we think there's talent there, but I think there's a bigger drop-off when you go from first team to second team on the defensive end position than when you go from first team to second team on the defensive tackle rotation. I think you got 5-6 starter caliber guys on that D tackle. No question. I don't care who you start. It doesn't matter to me. Just I do have a bigger question mark of if you lose Bryce or you take him off the field or you lose Boubacar or just you take him off the field to give him a rest, is there a big drop-off? So I think the biggest question for him is, can you get and it's not a lack of talent. This is proven talent, consistency, all that stuff. Can you get the most out of Keon? Can you get the most out of Logan Thomas in whatever role you devise for him? Can you get the most out? Can you get Rodney Dunham and or Ebenezer Utade? Can Joe Reif be in position to help you out? I don't know who that's going to be. That's what Coach Partridge's getting paid the big bucks to do. And that ultimately is going to determine if Athlon gets proven right by having their D-line number 2. That's going to be a big part of that, in my opinion, is that depth at defensive end. Because if Boubacar's got to play 50-plus snaps a game because you just can't put the number 2 in, then guess what? By the time you get to November and then into the postseason, he's going to be gassed. So that's my biggest question mark for him. Do you have a different one for him, Trev?
Yeah, mine's strictly focused on Bryce Young. Agree with a lot of what you said. Can Charlie Partridge get Bryce Young in his 3rd season to take that next jump? Spent a lot of time talking about what we believe Boubacar is going to be this year, but I've seen Notre Dame defensive lines, especially at end, where it's just one side dominant, and it can't be that this year. You can game plan very quickly around that. We saw that.
Flosky.
Yep,
for 2 years. Yeah.
So what can he get out of Bryce Young? Can he get Bryce Young to, 1, believe that he can be as good as what everybody else knows that he can be, and 2, can he just improve him overall as a well-rounded player? Can he improve what he is against the run, and can he continue adding to his pass rushing repertoire?
What would you say about linebacker, Trev?
This one's a little bit more tough because it has the most experience by, I guess you could call it like per capita coming back, with 5 guys coming back in a rotation. But it's probably a tie between consistency and coverage and then consistency within the depth. Like there have been at times some noticeable drop-offs when Jalen Snead is on the field. Not from an athleticism standpoint. That has never been a question about him. But as far as being assignment correct, playing fundamentally sound football, there is a difference when it's Drake and Jaden or Drake and Kingston, and then when it's like Drake and Snead. But bright side is this has been the most consistent football I've seen Jalen Snead play this past spring.
Mm-hmm.
And so that question is partially answered. Still got to see it in games, but I'd say that and then consistency and across the board in the room and coverage are my 2 biggest for them, for Brian John Murray.
Agree. Secondary, the big thing for me is going to be, can you get Tay Johnson to be a consistent player? And can you get Christian Gray to be a consistent player? That's it. I mean, there's DJ McKinney, the young players, but at the end of the day, this secondary is going to be defined. Their excellence will be defined by the ability to get Tay and especially Christian to play within the a certain, like, you're never going to play your best every single Saturday. Nobody does. But can you play within a range of excellence every Saturday?
Yeah.
Where it's not here and then here and then here and then here and then here for a couple games and then down here. That's going to be the key, especially for Christian. For Tay, it's more of, you saw a lot of young guy mistakes. For Christian, it's like, dude, we've seen that stuff for 2 years from you now. Like, we have seen, I mean, I'd say like 80 to 85% of Christian Gray's snaps are good to really good. Another 5 to 10% is just, dude, that's not good enough. And then another 5% is like, dude, that's terrible. What are you doing? But within that, that's a lot of good snaps, Trevor. But when you're a DB, those 5 to 10% of the bad ones can really be damaging.
Unfortunately.
And they tend to come in like games. Like, it's not like a play here, a play there. It's like that game he was bad, or that game he was bad. If you can get Christian Gray to play consistently within that good to really good week after week after week, he's a great player. Like, great player. Because we've seen him be a great player for stretches in his career. Not like, remember he had that one good game? Boy, if we could just get that every week. Well, that's dumb. He's been a starter for 2 years, and he's had one great game you can point to. I could point to a lot of excellent performances from Christian Gray and wish we could see that every week. That's why I know he's capable of it. And so if you can get him to be just a steady football player, he's going to be a stud.
Oh, yeah.
Like, no question. And that's why I say those 2 guys just becoming more consistent. I don't really care what else happens after that. Leonard keep being Leonard, Adon keep being Adon, and you could even get last year's version of DJ McKinney, and not even the 24 version. But if Tay and Christian are consistent, you will have the number 1 secondary in college football, and it won't be close. So I don't know that there's a bigger task on defense than those 2 guys. I would even argue more important than Bryce Young taking that big jump. But you could argue then, but if Bryce takes that big jump, it does make the job easier for Christian and Tay. So we can have the debate on that. But, like, I think that is, and the reason I say that, because you can piece together a rotation that allows you to be good opposite Bubakars, where you're not going to do that at nickel per se. So that's the argument that I make. But man, that's a very important task, and a task that would have a huge impact on this defense. So that, to me, is the biggest task for Aaron Henry, is that right there.
Yeah, agreed. I'll just add on, you got to find something to do with Dallas Golden this year.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to be too good to not play. And I'm not saying that means you just put him at a starting spot and just let him develop and grow. I'm not saying that you just keep him as a rotation guy. He will be too good to keep off the field. He can be almost your insurance policy at 2 spots, and that's very rare to have in the secondary. He can be your insurance policy at nickel. He can be your insurance policy at field. He can project, to Brian's point, to safety and a boundary. I agree with that. But for this season specifically, the 2 places that he took reps at this year was field corner and nickel corner. Mm-hmm. You got to find something to do with him, because he's going to be way too good to keep off the field.
Yep. Agree.
From Andrew Gilmore, I think we will judge Freeman at the end about whether it was a good decision to go young at wide receiver in the portal. and stay pat at running back. Everything else seems perfect.
I don't disagree with that. I think that's fair. I'm fine with them staying pat at running back. There's a conversation in the chat about, well, should they go on after Hollywood Smothers? No. We said that at the time. No. But I'll say this. I mean, if those two areas don't pan out, if receiver's not good, then sure, you could say that. Those are things. I think I would probably be a little bit more locked into if running back doesn't play up to standard, that maybe that was a mistake because there was Relique Brown was out there, Hollywood Smothers, if they go do great at Texas. I mean, you could have that debate. I doubt that I'll look back at receiver and be like, man, they should have gone and got a veteran. Like, what veteran? Ian Strong? Like, I'm sorry. I wouldn't have taken those guys there. Some of the other guys they did go after. If Nick Marsh dominates at Michigan, at Indiana, you're like, man, they tried to get Nick Marsh. He decided to go to Indiana. I'm not going to fault. They didn't choose to not, like the route they went, especially with Quincy Porter, happened later in the process when it was obvious that he wanted to jump in the portal. I don't know that they knew that Quincy Porter was for sure going to jump in the portal at the very beginning. So receiver, I'm probably a little less keen on there, but I think if the running back position struggles, we could look back and say they should have gone and got a running back.
Sure.
I don't know how harshly I'll criticize him for that. Like, here's why I say I'm more sympathetic to Andrew being critical of that than me, because I don't like being critical of something and hammering a coach for something that I didn't think was a problem in the first place. So if I'm like, man, Freeman made a huge mistake not going to the portal for running back. What was your opinion at the time, Brian? Those shows, man, it was crazy. Like, that whole portal shows, they all got deleted. I don't know what happened. What about your running back previews? They got deleted too. I don't know what happened, man. Like, it's crazy. Like, all the things where we might have said the opposite got deleted. No, I'm just not going to hammer for that. We'll point out, like, hey, this was a mistake, but I'm not going to be like, this is why he's not, because I would have said I didn't think they should have done it. I don't like people that support a decision in the moment, but then act like this was the dumbest thing a coach ever did when it doesn't work out. I respect people that said, hey, I didn't think it was a good decision at the time, and I was proven right. You got all the right to talk your talk, and I'll do that. There's things I've been right about at the moment, and when I get proven right, I'll say, hey, this is why I told you not to do this. But I hate when people support a decision that doesn't work out and then want to act like, oh, this coach is an idiot for not doing that.
It's the revisionist history piece
It's one thing to be critical and point out, hey, this was the wrong decision. But you know what? If that happens, I will say, hey, I was wrong too. Because I thought he made the right decision. He was wrong. I was wrong. And this is what he should have done. That's fair. Because that's your job. Your job is to be honest and analyze it. But I won't be like, I can't believe Freeman made that mistake. Because I'll be like, yeah, I would have made the same one.
Yeah. I mean, I had to eat crow when Matt Patricia turned into what he turned into at Ohio State. At the time, I said that was a silly hire, and they had the best defense in the country last year. But in pertains to Andrew's question, I'm with you on running back. I think Hollywood Smothers is a good player. But the argument that I made at the time, and I still stand by it now, is I think if you put him in that room with Aeneas and Kedron and Nolan and Javian and Jonas, I think he's just a guy. It's not a bad thing, but I don't think he is what he was perceived to be by some other schools. Mm-hmm. My pushback with this one is me personally, so I guess I can't speak for the masses. I won't judge Freeman about the decision to go young at wide receiver. That's going to be more indicative of something that we talked about earlier in the show about Mike Brown needing to show that he has to develop young wide receivers.
That's a great point.
And
what you're saying is, Trev, your criticism would be more of retaining Mike Brown as opposed to you made that. Yeah, that's a good point.
Because as a head coach, you kind of have to weigh your options of like, okay, when you have to go through and reevaluate everything, you went in back-to-back seasons and gotten two very experienced boundary wide receivers in Bo Collins and Malachi Fields. And in some ways, your offense performed with those guys. And then in other ways, there was a little bit left to be desired. Now, we can get into they should have been used differently. I wish Malachi would have been used differently, which I wish he would have been. But I'm not going to fault the head coach for going in with the upside and going out and getting a former 5-star recruit in Quincy Porter and a former highly touted guy in Mylan Graham. I would place the blame a little bit more on Mike Brown of like the criticism, I should say, on Mike Brown of like, these are now two more younger guys in the case against Mike Brown to say it's like, well, you haven't shown by and large that you can develop young talent. I wouldn't put that blame on Freeman.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Now, if Andrew wants to go back and hammer Marcus Freeman for that, if that's how it turns out, then he has the right to do so because he's been very consistent with this.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, that's fair. If it turns out to be a problem, that's very fair, Andrew, because you had issues with that. You said, I think they should go get a running back. I think you should get a veteran coach. So I'd have no problem if Andrew wants to kind of – because it's not revisionist history for him. It's, hey, I said this was an issue, and I was right, and you'd have a right to say that. Like, you'd have a right – now, my only issue is don't run the victory lap in a way that like gloats that Notre Dame struggled. Like, this is how, but hey, look, man, this is what I said. And it turned out to be a problem. I have no problem with that at all because he's been consistent on it.
Yeah, he has.
And knowing Andrew, I think if they end up turning out well, I think he'll have no problem saying they made the right move. I don't think he'll have any issue saying that either because he's done that before. He said, hey, I didn't think Freeman, this was the right move. And it turned out to be a great move. So I don't think he'll have any issue doing that either.
From Joseph Barrett, Brian, I can appreciate the offseason optimism. However, is there any chance of Notre Dame being last season's Penn State?
I mean, I can't say no because I didn't see last year's Penn State coming. Who saw that coming, Trev? Who was like, man, I'll tell you what, I'm concerned about this. They may end up starting 3-3 and firing James Franklin. I don't have a clue of anyone who thought they're going to be anything outside the top 5. I think you had him as your preseason number 1. I had him 3rd or 4th, which meant we both thought they were going to be in the Final Four. We just disagreed on what their seeding would be, basically. I mean, that kind of thing. So, no, I mean, how can I say, is there a chance? How can I say no? No, there's no chance because I didn't see Penn State coming. I will say this, it would be the biggest shock that I've ever experienced in college football history if that's the case. For 2 reasons. One is their schedule is incredibly soft through the first 6 games. I mean, look, Penn State didn't exactly play like a juggernaut of teams through the first 6 games, but you could point to the Oregon game and be like, that game kind of broke them a little bit. And that was a really good football team. I mean, Penn State started last year, what was it? Didn't they start like 3-0?
Oh, yeah. That game against Oregon was like a huge –
it broke them. They put so much into that game. And then you go on the road and they fell so far behind against UCLA and tried to come back. I think it broke them. I think it broke that football team. They put so much into that Oregon game for a month, nothing but Oregon. And I think it broke them. Yeah.
Yeah, Joseph. I mean, to answer your question, is there any chance? Yeah, of it being 0.01 in my opinion, but that's not 0. So is there a chance? Sure.
There'd be a lot more zeros before I got to my 1, but yeah. You can't dismiss it.
But I would be Yeah, I mean, I would be 10 times more shocked if that happened than if Notre Dame won the national title. They haven't done that since 1988.
I'd way more shocked. I just don't see it happening, but I can't dismiss it because we've seen crazier things.
From Irish for Life 99, is there any short of a national championship this year that would be considered a successful season? And what would you consider a failed season?
So I'm going to repeat what I've said before. And again, it depends on what we mean by successful season. If you're talking about successful from the big picture standpoint of Notre Dame football, where the standard is championships, then no, nothing short of a title is successful. But if we're talking a more practical aspect, you can't look back at 100 years of football and say that Notre Dame's only won 11 titles, so the other 89 years during that stretch are bad seasons. It's been over 100 now. So, but you get the point, right? I can't say that's stupid. There's been great years. They just came up short. There's a scenario in which they come up short this year and it's still a successful season. It may end in a disappointing manner, but you can't look back and they went 14-1 and just lost to a team. I don't even say who it would be, but a team the team was just better than they were. That team was better than we thought they were going to be. That team went, undefeated. Notre Dame had 11 guys taken in the draft. That team had 15. Notre Dame had 3 first-round picks. That team had 6. There's a world in which they just get beat by somebody better than them. And I can't look back and say, boy, that was an unsuccessful season. I would say that was a great year. Didn't end the way we wanted to end. Now look at why you lost and go out this offseason and fix those things and get better in those areas and go get it next year. So I'd be disappointed, but I wouldn't say it's not successful. What would I consider a failed season? anything short of the semifinals for me, that flat out. Anything short of the semifinals, I'm going to look back and say that was a very disappointing season. I don't know that I'd say failed, but like very disappointing. Didn't live up to the standard. Things have got to change. Like this is 2 years in a row you've wasted loaded rosters and couldn't even get to the semifinals. 2 years in a row where we would argue that Notre Dame had one of the 4 best rosters in college football and didn't get to the Final Four. So anything short of the semifinals. Once you get to the semifinals, then my desire of saying it's a success or not is who they get beat by and how they get beat.
Yeah, working back to front on this, I'm with you on what we would consider a failed season. The national championship piece is so tough because I'm with you. The standard for any premier program like a Notre Dame, like an Ohio State, a Georgia, a Texas, a Bama is to go out and win a national title. I agree with that 100%. The tough part about this year specifically for me is if it doesn't happen this year, I will start to pose the question of like, okay, so what else do you need? I don't think you need to win a national title for it to be considered a successful season if it was a needle-moving season. Right. 2024 was a needle-moving season for Notre Dame, and they didn't win the title. But it was needle-moving because they won in the quarterfinals. They won in the semifinals. They ended that drought. They rebounded from a horrid loss to Northern Illinois. The thing that makes it hard for me to answer this question pertains to this season is what is the thing that they do this year that moves the needle forward as a program short of winning a national title? I don't know the answer to that question. So that's what makes it hard for this year specifically because, like, what else do you need? You have the secondary, you have the linebacking core, you have continuity with all 3 coordinators, you have a returning starting quarterback, you have one of the best play callers in the game, you're going into year 5. So then what? What do you – because next year it'll be, well, now he's in year 6 and he has this now. And it's – so that's what makes it tough for this year specifically. But I don't think per se they have to win the title for me to be like, that's the only way I view it being successful because I'm also not naive to the fact that there could just be a team that's better. I think Notre Dame has one of the top 4 rosters in the country. That means there's 3 other teams in contention in that conversation. Maybe just one of them goes absolutely nuts this year. I don't know.
Yep.
From Andre Tonsil, if Coach Denrock does one thing to help Notre Dame win a national championship, what would it be? And then ditto for Chris Ash.
Good question. Very good question. My one thing for Chris Ash is simpler than Mike Denrock. I already thought about that one. It's that he allows this team to play fast and aggressive every week. I don't care what the run game, I don't care what the coverage, man versus zone breakdown is. Don't care. Be aggressive. Aggressive doesn't mean blitzing 65% of the time. Aggressive means attack the line of scrimmage, attack the football, attack routes. Like, look, you can play cover 3, reroute the heck out of any kind of vertical release you have up the seam. Reroute the heck out of it, and then get to your curl flat. Or be aggressive in everything you do. That's what I want. And after that, I don't really give a rip what your man, your zone versus man breakdown is. Attack the football. Use your length, use your speed, use your talent. For Mike, do you have anything different for Chris Ash on defense, Trev?
No, mine was just big picture. It was, and it'll sound aggressive, but just get out of your player's way. Don't over scheme yourself out of things.
Same thing. That's what aggressive is to me. Offensively, for Mike Denrock, it really comes down to, do you have the ability to have your team ready to play dominant football up front? Like, I know Joe Rudolph's the O-line coach, but Mike Denrock has an O-line background as well. He played tight end in college. He's coached offensive line before. I need you to be able to step in and say, hey, Joe, this is what I need you to do to get this line playing at an elite level. And that's going to be a big thing for me with him. Part of that is holding Joe Rudolph, making sure Joe's doing what you want him to do. But the other part of that too is how are you building this team? And this isn't like you run this amount, pass this amount, but just the level of eliteness that I'm demanding from the offensive line. I need you to play aggressive. I need you to play with discipline. I need you to play with a unit, whether we're throwing the ball 50 times or running the ball 50 times. I need you to play at an elite level week after week. And what role does he have in that? Obviously, Joe Rudolph has a very important role in that. What role does Mike Denrock have in that and getting the most out of it? The other stuff, I'm not at all worried about whether or not he's going to call good plays for CJ Carr or whatever. It's can the offensive line play at an elite level? And how does his background coaching that position help him make sure that they're all headed in the right direction from a coaching standpoint?
The only other thing that I have to add to Mike Denrock is I agree. I think the offensive line and trench play is the clear-cut number one. Yep. Only thing that I would add is be willing to play your younger, talented wide receivers, even if they don't know every single check and every single audible and every single this. Like in college football, there's an element to this game where it's like, my guy is just better than your guy. He might not run the crispest route, but I think there's maybe 2 cornerbacks in the entire country that can run stride for stride with Cam Williams, and one of them is on defense.
We saw him absolutely embarrass Aiden Pouncey on just a straight go route. And Aiden Pouncey's a pretty good football player, and he made him fall down. He ran by him so fast. I mean, you go watch the right, like, dude, I need to see that. If I don't see that 5-6 times a game, then you're just not doing this right.
Yeah,
that's a great point. Here's a quick one, and this is kind of what we're talking about. Goes to Ben D. Am I right to be nervous about Chris Ash's play calling? I understand it. Like I said, I think we should all have some level of, I'm curious to see what we're going to see this year because of how last year went. I think that's fair. And we can all say, hey, I need to see it, but all be optimistic that he'll do what needs to be done.
Yep.
I think that's very fair. Here's a couple questions from Salty that kind of go hand in hand, Trevor. So we'll kind of bring them together.
Cool. First one from Salty: when assessing an assistant coach's performance, is it most informative to do so at the end of his second full season?
And then the second question is, if an assistant coach is performing poorly in his first season, which is preferable, allowing him a second season or terminating him before the end of the season. It's interesting to say this, Trev, because I do think the best way to evaluate a coach is after year 2.
Sure.
But at the same time, I think as a head coach, you have to know after 1 year, this isn't getting fixed. Like Urban Meyer, great coach, Hall of Famer, 3 national titles, all that. He made the mistake of making, after Tom Herman left, was it after Tom? Yeah, after Tom Herman left, he promoted Ed Warner and Tim Beck, not that Tim Beck, the other Tim Beck, to be his offensive coordinator at Ohio State in 2016. Failed. And that lasted 1 year.
Yeah.
And then he made a change, and I'm trying to remember who he brought in first. Because did he bring in Ryan? He brought in Ryan Day right away, didn't he? Wasn't Ryan Day on that 27 coaching staff?
I thought he was.
I'm just going to go look that up real quick. But you got to make those changes. You got to know, hey, yeah, this guy can get better, but this guy it was Kevin Wilson and Ryan Day. That's who it was. So it was both. You got to be able to look and say, hey, listen, this wasn't good enough, and yes, he can get better, but it's not good. It's not going to be. You're not going to go from this to that in one off season. What I more mean is, if a guy does a solid job in year 1, I'm not throwing him under the bus and, look, here's the reasons why. But in every circumstance, Trev, I think a better way to evaluate a guy is after year 2, and then even more so after year 3. By year 4, you kind of are what you are. If you haven't established yourself by the time you get to year 4, then maybe that's just who you are. And that's why I think this year is so big for Joe Rudolph. And Mike Brown to a degree, but Mike Brown's just going to do his 3rd year at Notre Dame. So it's like, yeah, but you also have to be able to evaluate why a coach maybe didn't live up to expectations is part of that. Does he not work enough? Does he not focus? Is he not doing this? Is he not doing that? And just realize, like, dude, this is who he is. I think you have to have that ability. And sometimes you've got to be able, and this isn't, I'm not saying there's anyone on the staff he should have fired after 1 year. Even Chris Ash, dude, he had a top 10 defense last year. How about, instead of firing, that's why I say everybody's so quick to want to fire a guy. How about you work with the guy and try to correct some issues and coach him up and say, hey, listen, man, you did a lot of good things last year, Chris, but this guy right here, that's who I need to see every week. I don't ever want to see this crap again. This is my expectations of you. Let's go get her done. And then if the guy refuses to do it, then you make a move. But I'm not firing Chris Ash after 1 year because I know he's a really smart football coach. But he and I are going to have to sit down in the offseason and have a conversation about, hey, man, if we're going to do this thing together and if we're going to win a championship together, you need to understand this is my expectation for you. Not have a great defense, but this right here, how we did this, how we did that, that's what I expect to see every week. How we did this right here, I don't want to hear excuses about we didn't have Devontae Smith or whoever else, because I don't care who you put in there. We were going to struggle that game. because that was not who we are. We don't play football that way. We play football this way. And then let him roll. And then if he refuses to do it, then he's basically not, he's being insubordinate, and you fire him at the end of the year. But I just don't think firing someone is always the way to pathway forward. Sometimes it's like, look, this guy has potential, or maybe he didn't understand this. Let's work with him and get the most out of him, because the guy does have the chops. You know, intelligence wise and all that. You just got to get him to be on board with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, my own personal philosophy, barring a coach just doing the blatant wrong things, I don't want to fire a coach after year one. Because I think there's things that they can improve upon. I won't lie. I'll be straight up honest. I wanted Al Golden gone after 22. I was like, yep, the experiment was cool. I'm out on it. I watched him get worked by Navy. The double safety zone blitz again, or the double safety blitz against Ohio State on the road in that scenario was just absolutely atrocious.
With a guy off coming an injured, a starter coming off the okay.
Yeah, like I dove way too much into the weeds with that, read too much into the tea leaves of like, this is going to be things to come. He wants this to be an NFL defense. And then here I was a couple years removed from that moment, and talk about, man, could you imagine if Al Golden was still here, blah, 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 blah. So I think 1 year is way too quick to write the obit for somebody. And that's how I view it. So I'll always give them a little bit more, barring you just doing the complete blatant wrong things, whether it's ethically or fundamentally or what have you. So that's how I look at that.
Yep, good stuff. Let's get to a few more here, Trev. We've got I want to get a couple more coaching questions out, and then we've got some non-coaching questions we'll quickly address as well. Here's a couple. This is always an interesting topic.
From Ballpeen Shillelagh, the coaches that get talked about are ones in the upper echelon risers or failed. Who among the, quote, failed coaches might have a better reputation had they stayed at a lower level?
I've said this a million times. If Randy Edsall would have stayed at UConn, and if Tom O'Brien would have stayed at Boston College, we'd have very different opinions of their careers as coaches. Flat out. Like Randy Edsall going to Maryland, that was a terrible fit. Terrible fit. And he bombed. Tom O'Brien leaving Boston College to go to NC State was a big mistake, because he was not an NC State kind of coach. Fit matters. It absolutely matters.
I'd put Rich Rod into that category too. Him going to Michigan was just a big mistake.
Terrible fit. And he's never recovered from it. I mean, he really hasn't. He had a pretty good gig at West Virginia, and he should have stayed. Honestly, he should have stayed. So those are some guys that just kind of pop off the top of my head. I have some concerns about Matt Campbell being that way. We'll find out. You know, I think he was really good at that level, but just because you won at Iowa State doesn't mean you're going to win at a bigger school. Sometimes it does. It doesn't always.
Sure.
So we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I fully believe that that's a thing. Like, man, you were a heck of a coach, but you should stay there. But then there's also the Jim Trussels, who coached at the FCS level his whole career, won 4 national titles at Youngstown State, goes to Ohio State and wins a title at Ohio State, and is a great coach at Ohio State. So there are certainly some of those guys as well. Urban Meyer goes from, he's at Bowling Green, and within 2 years he's at Florida, or 3 years he's at Florida winning a national championship, right? He was at Bowling Green for 2 years, Utah 2 years, and then second year at Florida he wins a title. So like, some guys have the chops. The guys who failed are guys who just, they belonged at that lower level. That's what it boils down to. It's a good question. Here's another good one from All About Saturday.
Do you guys think adding an edge coach would benefit recruiting and development? Recruiting at edge has been amazing, but maybe there could be improvement from a developmental level.
It varies. I have no problem having 2 D-line coaches. None. I think there are circumstances where that makes a lot of sense. I really do. I don't know that it really benefits recruiting a whole lot unless you just have a D-line coach who's not a great recruiter. And so you hire an edge coach who just happens to be a great recruiter. There's merit to that. I have no problem with that. It just depends on the coach. I don't need an edge coach when Charlie Partridge is my defensive line coach. Now, does he need to have an analyst or a GA or whatever that can work with him, that can take certain groups and do the job of coaching them? Absolutely. Nick Sebastian's that guy right now, and he's someone that Al Washington absolutely trusted. Clearly, Marcus Freeman trusted him because he kept him on after Washington left, because he came with Washington kind of. And so there's clearly a lot of faith in Nick and what he can do and bring to the table, things like that. So those are important, because you can't always coach 4 positions. You need to have someone, just like Joe Rudolph's the old line coach, but he absolutely asks a lot of Rob Delaney. We'll see it at practice. He's over here coaching this group, And then Rob Delaney's got to coach that group, and you got to trust that guy to do the job and to back up what you're saying. So, and I don't care if it's an analyst or if it's a second coach or, it's a second full-time coach or if it's a GA. I don't care. You need someone that can help you in those situations, but he's still the D-line coach. There's also scenarios where I'd be totally fine having a guy that coaches D tackles and another guy that coaches D ends, as long as they all understand who ultimately is responsible for leading the room as a whole, because you do have to work together. It's kind of like O-line coaches. You've had teams. Urban Meyer won 3 national titles with a guard centers coach and a tackles tight ends coach. It can work with the right coaches. So I'm not against either one of those, but I've also seen teams win titles with one O-line coach and a GA to help. I don't think there's one way to make it work. I think it just depends on who you have making it work. And do you have coaches that are willing to say, hey, look, I this is my role. My job is to make sure our D tackles dominate. And it's his job to make sure the D ends dominate. And then we got to work together to make sure our guys are playing together. No, like, well, freaking, we did our job, but the ends did. That's the danger. You've got to have the right people in there. So I have no problem with that, but I just don't think that's needed at Notre Dame because you have Charlie Partridge. Now, if Charlie Partridge leaves and Marcus Freeman decides that's the route he wants to go, cool. Okay. Just make sure you hire the right guys. I don't think that's needed right now. But I think, and here's why. Specialization is great. Having a guard centers coach and a tackle side ends coach and a D tackle coach and a D end coach and a nickels coach. And that's great, but you can still only have 10 full-time assistant coaches. So it's different in the NFL. You can't be as specialized as much. You can hire analysts and GAs and stuff, but those guys don't make as much money. So the number of assistants can limit some of that stuff. But in theory, I think that it could be a great idea with the right coaches. You don't always need it, and I don't think they need it right now with Charlie Partridge.
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to make sure the right system and streamline and communication is in place. You don't want something to happen where, what was that season where like Notre Dame's quarterbacks were hearing one thing from Mike Sanford and then a different thing from the offensive coordinator and then a different thing from Brian Kelly. And it's sometimes when you have too many, it's kind of like when you do a group project in school and it's like, hey, initial thought is like, hey, the more brain power, the more we can delegate, the easier we can get this done. But if everybody doesn't communicate with each other and everybody starts running off with their own ideas, you kind of have a jumbled mess at the end. So that's the risk that you run with that. But I'm with Brian. In theory, I don't hate it.
Yeah. Let's see here. We got a lot of the good coaching questions. Here's an interesting one from Daily Comments, one of our resident Miami fans.
Are you guys worried that any warts or concerns won't be exposed early, if any exist, like in years past, due to not playing an on-paper tough game till BYU?
I think that can be a worry. I think it can be, and I think that's a fair thing to ask. I've said this before, Trev. Sometimes if your focus is just on the end result, you can admit, and this was a big problem for Brian Kelly. Hey, we're winning, so let's ignore the red flags that are clearly there. I'll give you a perfect example. I remember, and people that have known me since when I first started covering the team will remember this. In 2009, they beat you Nevada something like 31-0, 38-0, something like that. And after the game, I was ripping John Tenuta's defense. And I'm like, they got lucky. They dropped like 8 passes, 10 passes. Like schematically, it was very unsound. Nevada just didn't have the talent to take advantage. You're a hater. You're jealous. All the stuff that I get accused of every time I criticize a coach. What happened the next week? They made Tate Forcier look like a Heisman candidate.
Sure did.
And they were terrible the rest of the year because I wasn't looking at the result. I was looking at the process. I was looking at the scheme, looking at like, if you're playing not Nevada, that's going to get ripped up. You're going to get killed doing that. Because if I'm coaching on you on the other side of the field, I promise you I'm going at that in ways that Chris Alt's team did not. So you have to be able to look and say, the result isn't what matters. It's the process. Hey, we were very undisciplined in how we played coverage against Rice and Purdue. It didn't matter because Boubacar could not be blocked. And then look back and say, we got to fix this. And you're in the film room on Sunday or Monday, whenever they do film with the team, and you're like, Coach, we won 41-7. Yeah, I don't care. It's Purdue. It's Rice. It's not about the result, because if we're playing Georgia, if we're playing Ohio State, if we're playing Miami, we're giving up a touchdown right here. That's the thing, Trev. That can be done by good coaches. I don't care what the score is. And this is why I've always said you can't be focused on the result. You got to be focused on the process. This is why we've pointed out Brian Kelly was terrible at that. He would always argue, but look at the result. And then with Nick Saban, we've seen him go into post-game press conferences where he won an SEC game by 30 points and he's pissed off the entire time and he's mad. And you're like, what is he mad about? Because he understands we might have played well enough to beat Vanderbilt today, but that ain't going to work against Georgia in 2 weeks. And that's why it doesn't matter who you're playing. There's a standard. This is why Marcus Freeman always talks about the standard. He said something before last year that I think people misunderstood, and he said, I don't really care about – I don't look at our success as wins and losses. And people lost their minds. Like, you're at Notre Dame. You should want – you're missing the point. What he's saying is wins and losses don't matter. Us playing to a standard is what matters. And his point was, if we play to our standard, we don't lose to anybody. When we lose, it's because we don't play to our standard. If they'd have played to their standard, the only games they might have lost in Marcus Freeman's entire career is maybe Ohio State in 22 and maybe USC in 22 and maybe Ohio State 24. That's it. That's it. And those are maybes. Those are all maybes. Because they had a lead over Ohio State for more than Ohio State led that game in 2022. So that's why I say maybe. And that's the point that Coach Freeman was making. It's not about the result. It's about the process. It's about the standard. Did we play the game the way we're supposed to play the game? I don't care that we beat Syracuse 70-7. We were just way better than they were. That's not going to work in 3 weeks against Indiana or Georgia. That's the point. That's what good coaches do. And as long as they're focused on that and not the warts, like as a DB, I can watch my guy's got real lazy footwork on his transitions, and it doesn't matter because the receiver he's going against is not in this league. But I can look at that and say, hey, we got to fix that, because when we play somebody good, you're going to be in trouble there. Good coaches can see that. And as long as they have that, then I don't really, then no, I'm not worried about it. But we saw Notre Dame staff do that in the past. It's a very different staff now than it was then.
Yeah.
We can point to 2023 and all that, but who from that staff is currently still here? I think it's only one guy, right? Isn't it Joe Rudolph? He's the only guy besides Marcus Freeman?
Yeah.
New coordinators, new special teams coordinator. No, Marty Biaggi is the only other one. But, I mean, nobody else is on the staff then. Everybody else is new. So it's like it's a different staff. That'd be my only concern. That would be it.
Same page.
Yeah. I think that's going to – there's some other great questions here, Travis. A couple that we'll knock out here real quick. So some of the recruiting questions, like those are more message board type questions. Jay Melvin, it's another reason why you need to be on the message board. Here's one from Jay Melvin. It says, Brian, do you think LSU this year will be better than Alabama, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss from what you've seen in the spring? It's hard to comment on that because we never saw LSU at full strength this spring, even more so than other teams because we never saw them with their starting quarterback.
Yeah. So
it's kind of hard to see that. And then I hold LSU to a different spring standard than everybody else because they're the only one of that group that has a quote-unquote new coaching staff. Ole Miss does to a degree, but it's still the same head coach you had in the playoffs last year. It's different than what LSU has. So I don't know that I'd say from the spring. Preseason, I'll have A&M ranked higher than LSU. I'll have Oklahoma ranked higher than LSU. And then I'm not sure where I'm going to have LSU and Alabama. They'll be close. I'll have all of them ahead of Ole Miss. But even if Lane Kiffin is as good as a lot of us think he'll be this year at LSU, I still think Oklahoma will be better. I'm way higher on Oklahoma than a lot of people are, it would seem. I really like this Oklahoma team. And same thing with A&M. As long as they can get their offensive line figured out. I have more question marks about A&M than I do Oklahoma because it's a brand new, remade 4 out of 5. And everybody but the center is going to be not just someone new into the starting lineup, someone new into the program.
Yeah.
And it's hard to really project that. So I could see LSU being better than any of those teams, but they've got a ways to go before they're going to be there. But that's to be expected because they're coming from a different place than all those other teams because it's a brand new coaching staff for the most part. A whole remade roster for the most part. New culture's got to be created and all that type of stuff. And so I would hope that LSU is behind all those teams because if they're not, then that says a lot of negative things about those teams down there than it does LSU because they're in the infancy stages of building this new culture under Lane Kiffin. So I expect them to be behind in April and May. It's whether or not they can get to where they need to get to by September. That's all that matters.
Yep.
And then here's the last one, Trev. This is one from my guy, Paul. Is the gap officially closed? I'll say this again. The gap is not closed until Notre Dame wins a title. It's as simple as that. It's not closed until they win the title. It's 100%. Not closed until they win the title. Jay Melvin, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. I would like for you to bring this question back tomorrow for our midweek rundown conversation. I have a lot of things I want to say about this, but I wanted to have more time to do it, and I didn't. I knew we weren't going to have the time to really dive into that today because then we wouldn't get a lot of other questions answered, and we really wanted to hold to what we said, which is we're going to give precedent to the coaching questions, and we pretty much had all coaching questions for the most part. So I didn't want to go back on what we said because this would have taken up a lot of the mailbag time. But I would love to address this tomorrow. So if you could bring this up tomorrow or somebody could bring this up tomorrow, I'd love to be able to address it because Trevor and I both have some very strong opinions on that. So, but just didn't think it was going to kind of fit into what we're talking about today. So that's where I'm at. So that'll do it for us today, Trev.
Folks, another really fun show here. Brian and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. going live with the midweek rundown. Going to be another full slate of segments for everybody tomorrow. So be sure to tune in 1 p.m. If you're not done with Irish Breakdown content today, which I know you guys won't be, IB Nation Sports Beat goes live in an hour. I believe they're also going to be talking about some of the Brendan Sorsby stuff. They're also going to be talking about some of the top returning players on Notre Dame's roster. So you're not going to want to miss that show this evening. On your way out of this show, please be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here and the best way to stay in tune is be a premium message board subscriber at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow,
which we will end every show with. And if you don't like us pushing that, and then you don't, the great thing is in this country, you don't have to watch. Isn't that great?
That's very true. That is very true.
See y'all tomorrow.
Until next time.
Have a great one.